In the sun-scorched waters of the Caribbean, the Sapphire Dawn glided across gently rolling waves, a floating palace of polished teak and gleaming brass. On board, the Standish family, prominent, sophisticated, and accustomed to every comfort, believed they were embarking on a carefree voyage to celebrate an upcoming engagement. The horizon seemed endless with promise. Laughter and champagne mixed with the salt-tinged air. But just beneath that tranquil surface, a ruthless crew of outlaws had already set their sights on the wealth and status that floated, unsuspecting, above them. These marauders believed they would find easy prey, wealthy socialites too distracted by luxury to put up a fight. What they didn't count on was the silent presence of one man, Gabe Warren, a former Marine Scout swimmer whose quiet demeanor concealed years of elite training. In a twist as deadly as the ocean's undertow, this unassuming fiancé was prepared to go to any length to protect the woman he loved and her family. What began as a dream vacation would soon erupt into a life-or-death struggle, exposing the dark underbelly of modern piracy and testing the Standish family's bonds in ways they never imagined. Just as the first hint of a predatory threat shimmered on the endless blue horizon, no one aboard had any idea how much would be risked and lost before the sun set again. Quick pause before we continue. Welcome to Fabled Frames. Please tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow's story is mind-blowing. Victoria Standish pressed her palm against the polished banister that spiraled gracefully down from the upper deck. The radiant morning sun revealed shimmering flecks of coral in the yacht's hull, painting the deck with a warm glow. The yacht's name, Sapphire Dawn, was etched in gold near the stern and represented a life of luxury she had grown accustomed to, or rather, a life her parents insisted she live. She was the only child of Andrew and Cassandra Standish, a couple whose fortune stretched back to a storied history in shipping and real estate. Standing alongside her fiancé, Gabe Warren, she experienced a rare and quiet sense of peace in the midst of the Caribbean Sea. It felt as though their love had found the perfect setting for serenity and celebration. At just past dawn, everything looked calm. Gentle waves cradled the yacht and gulls circled overhead, hoping for morsels tossed overboard. The day promised a wealth of sunshine, turquoise water, and carefree moments with her parents, a few close friends, and the modest crew who catered to the family's needs. It was a precisely choreographed getaway, a chance to decompress from public engagements, corporate business deals, and the looming paparazzi. Victoria was thrilled to have Gabe beside her. Despite his quiet demeanor, she felt a sense of stability and safety in his presence, an inexplicable confidence she had never experienced with anyone else. Gabe was a tall man in his early 30s, with sunlight and hair trimmed in a practical, military style. His quiet brown eyes took in everything around him in measured, analytical glances. A former Marine Scout swimmer, he rarely spoke about his time in the service. Often he would simplify his background with a shrug as if downplaying the seriousness of what he had once done. Victoria knew, however, that he had been deployed in conflict zones and had served an elite function she only vaguely understood. She heard bits and pieces of rumors from her father. He served in some highly specialized amphibious reconnaissance unit, but Gabe never boasted. He possessed a lethal skill set that sat dormant under a veneer of calm. In the distance, the crew busied themselves with stowing lines and adjusting the yacht's position to best take advantage of the morning light. Mr. Standish stood near the bow wearing a crisp linen shirt and scanning the horizon through tinted aviators. He was a man in his late 50s, with hair that had gone completely silver, giving him a distinguished air. That morning, he was discussing potential business ventures and expansions with Captain Henderson, an older gentleman who had captained the Standish yachts for nearly 2 decades. He trusted Henderson implicitly, even more than he trusted certain executives in his own company. If anything was amiss at sea, Henderson would know what to do, or at least how to keep the family safe. Victoria turned back to Gabe. Their conversation from the previous night still swirled through her mind. He had confided in her that sometimes he felt like a fish out of water in her world. Though he had grown up in a modest home, he had never experienced anything quite like the Standish lifestyle before meeting her. She teased him gently about it, promising that she'd do everything to help him feel at ease. And he, in turn, pledged to always protect her, regardless of how he might feel about the more opulent trappings of her life. The sky was so bright that Victoria squinted, reaching for her designer sunglasses. She studied Gabe's profile for a moment, taking in how comfortable he looked at sea. While the rest of her entourage needed some acclimation, Gabe navigated the rocking deck with natural grace. She could almost forget that behind that quiet confidence lay a set of skills and experiences that made him someone you didn't want to cross. She had never really seen that side of him in action, only glimpses, never needing to, as life had been so calm recently. A shrill laugh at the far end of the deck caught her attention. One of her mother's friends, an older woman wearing too much jewelry, sipped on a mimosa. Her voice carried across the deck, making small talk with the other guests. Victoria smiled politely. She felt a twinge of relief that she could simply remain at Gabe's side rather than wandering among idle chatter. There was another reason for the relief. A part of her recognized that Gabe had grown uneasy in large social gatherings. Tonight, they were scheduled to have a lavish dinner prepared by a private chef from Martinique, but she wondered if Gabe would prefer to dine quietly. She made a mental note to arrange for them to slip away if it got too crowded or too formal. Eventually, Andrew Standish waved them over. The engine's hum signaled a change in direction. They were charting a course around a small atoll famous for vibrant coral reefs. "We'll do some snorkeling there," Andrew said enthusiastically. "Perhaps we can take the tender around the bend after lunch." "Gabe, you'll join us, won't you?" Gabe nodded with a polite smile, his gaze drifting to the horizon. "Sounds good, sir," he replied softly. He was the only one who still called Andrew Standish sir, a product of his military upbringing that the older man found endearing. "Ah, come on, call me Andrew," Victoria's father insisted. "You're going to be my son-in-law soon." He clapped Gabe on the shoulder. "No formality needed." Victoria grinned. Her fiancé had come a long way with her parents. Initially, they hadn't known what to make of him. He wasn't from their social circle, and he didn't seem eager to partake in elaborate parties or professional gatherings. Yet his steadfast nature, quiet charm, and fierce loyalty had gradually won them over. Even the staff had warmed to him. He always cleaned up after himself and stayed humble, never acting like he was entitled to the privileges the Standish name conferred. Meanwhile, the gentle breeze ruffled the pages of a logbook perched on a nearby table. Gabe caught it just before the wind carried it overboard. The pages were filled with the captain's neat scrawl, detailing their daily position, the current sea conditions, and the condition of the engines. Gabe scanned the heading out of curiosity, noticing the coordinates and mentally plotting them. Old habits of recon and situational awareness never seemed to leave him. He offered the log back to Henderson, who acknowledged him with a nod. "Thank you, Mr. Warren," the captain said with a respectful tone. "Funny how the wind can catch us off guard out here. One second it's barely a breeze, the next it's enough to send half your belongings into the deep." Gabe nodded. "We always have to be on our toes," he replied. There was a flicker in his eyes that indicated he meant the statement in more ways than one. Something about the open sea reminded him of operations he had once undertaken, missions he'd rarely spoken about, missions that had kept him alive in treacherous waters under the cover of darkness. Without warning, a faint sense of unease pricked at the edges of Gabe's awareness. He chalked it up to reflex, that occasional old conditioning that reminded him to be vigilant. The last thing he wanted was to appear paranoid or to cast a shadow over Victoria's idyllic trip. He forced the thought aside, determined to enjoy the morning. He had no idea that an entirely different threat was drifting toward them, cloaked by calm seas and innocent appearances. The next few hours unfolded with an almost dreamlike quality. The staff laid out a bunch of fresh fruit, eggs, and pastries on the shaded aft deck. Delicate pitchers of fruit juices and champagne sparkled in the sunlight. Victoria's mother, Cassandra, lounged on a cushioned chair, wearing a broad sun hat, occasionally sipping from her champagne flute. Laughter mingled with the sound of the waves slapping gently against the hull. If one could bottle the essence of paradise, it would have felt something like this. But after brunch, Gabe found himself straying from the gathering. He walked the circumference of the yacht, scanning the horizon. Part of him suspected that his earlier sense of unease was simply from being a guest in a world of wealth where he felt like an outsider. Yet the tension in his neck didn't ease. When a seagull let out a sudden screech overhead, he spun instinctively, his posture tensing. Once again, he silently scolded himself for letting old instincts overshadow what should be a time of celebration. Below deck, he retreated to a small room that served as a lounge. The walls were paneled in polished mahogany, a testament to the Standish family's refined tastes. On one wall, framed family photographs depicted Andrew and Cassandra through various decades, always smiling, always well-dressed. Victoria, in her teenage years, was there too, a younger version of the bright, confident woman she had become. In the corner of the room, Gabe noticed an antique marine barometer. It read a stable forecast, calm weather, mild seas. A sliver of guilt crept in. Surely the sense of alarm he felt was nothing more than leftover vigilance from a life he had largely left behind. Yet as he gazed at those pictures, he knew that if anything ever threatened Victoria or her family, he would do what was necessary to keep them safe. His wedding band, yet to be placed on his finger, felt heavy even in his imagination. He would be joining this family soon. They were becoming his family, and he had no intention of failing them if the worst came to pass. Little did he know that miles away, on a battered fishing vessel with no visible name, an entirely different plan was unfolding. Armed men spoke in hushed tones, checking their weapons beneath ragged tarps. Their boats slipped through the ocean's current, seeking an opportune moment to approach unsuspecting yachts. That day, the Sapphire Dawn was to become their target, a grand prize in a region where piracy had become an increasingly bold phenomenon. While the Standish family busied themselves with brunch and snorkeling plans, these pirates aimed to execute their scheme with ruthless efficiency. Their approach was not random. They had inside information gleaned from local sources who resented the influx of wealthy vacationers and recognized a chance for ransom or plunder. They knew the Standish name, the length of the yacht, and even the minimum number of security personnel or staff that might be on board. And they were aware that, with so many wealthy guests, the boat was ripe for a takeover, its passengers vulnerable in the open sea. In a matter of hours, the Standish dream vacation would twist into a nightmare. While Gabe scrutinized the shimmering surface of the Caribbean through portholes, the predators drew closer. No alarm had been raised, no suspicious vessel spotted in time. The pirates' plan was straightforward: approach in the guise of fishermen, feign a distress call, then board with overwhelming force. By the time the crew or the family realized what was happening, it would be too late. Up on the sun deck, Victoria found her father measuring out 2 glasses of whiskey. The day had drifted into early afternoon, and a fresh breeze ran through her hair. The other guests lounged, snapping photos or testing out the wave runner tethered at the rear. She joined Andrew for a moment of quiet conversation, playfully nudging him. "Dad, you know it's not even 2 p.m., she teased. He shrugged. "We're on a yacht, honey. Time zones don't count." He handed her a glass. She sipped, wrinkling her nose at the strong taste. Andrew laughed. "You'll acquire it or you won't. More for me if you don't, right?" Cassandra stepped over, placing a hand on Victoria's back. "I love when you two get along," she said warmly. "This is what these trips are for, isn't it? Family time." Across the deck, Gabe lingered near the railing, glancing toward the horizon. He forced a smile for Victoria, though anxiety nagged him. Something about the day felt too perfect. Memories of missions off the coast of West Africa, near the Gulf of Aden, or in hidden coves across the world had trained him that trouble often arrived under a cloak of serene weather. Even the most idyllic vistas could erupt in chaos within moments. He had no idea just how soon his intuition would be validated. And when it happened, it would happen fast, with the savage swiftness he understood all too well. A shadow flickered on the distant horizon. Gabe squinted, uncertain if it was a mere reflection on the waves or something more sinister. He promised himself he'd keep watch, all the while praying that his instincts were wrong. Gabe's discomfort intensified as the afternoon sun began its descent. A hazy golden light streamed across the Caribbean, transforming gentle waves into a glimmering mosaic of reds, pinks, and oranges. He tried to pretend that the day remained perfect, that the world beyond the yacht's railing was nothing but serenity. Yet every fiber of his being told him otherwise. Moments after he had first glimpsed that flicker on the horizon, it vanished, only to reappear an hour later, this time as an unmistakable outline of a vessel. The yacht's crew, a small team of 4 beyond Captain Henderson, was scattered. One was in the galley, prepping the next meal. Another was tending to the engines below deck. 2 more were on deck, coiling ropes, tidying loungers, and making sure the guests had everything they needed. It was standard procedure. After all, they rarely had reason to worry, especially in these waters. Modern piracy, though it existed, was seldom at the forefront of wealthier travelers' minds. Still, Gabe remained near the helm. He slid up to the bridge, pressing a hand against the smooth teak frame of the door. "Captain," he said quietly, stepping into the modest, high-tech control room. Instrument panels glowed green and yellow in the dim interior. Henderson swiveled in the captain's chair. "Yes, Mr. Warren? Something on your mind?" "There's a boat out there," Gabe began, nodding toward the windows. "I saw it earlier. Might be nothing, but we should keep an eye on it." The captain peered through the tinted glass. His weathered face hardened for a moment. "I noticed it as well," he finally said. "Looks like an old fishing boat. Could be drifting. Could be local fishermen. Hard to say." Gabe tilted his head. "It's anchored in an odd spot for fishing though, isn't it?" Henderson nodded slowly. "I thought so, too." He adjusted a knob on the radar, narrowing the range to focus on the vessel's position. "They haven't come closer in the last 30 minutes, but they've also not gone away. I'll keep them under observation. If they approach, I can radio the Coast Guard." His reassuring tone tried to settle Gabe's unspoken alarm. "But these waters are fairly monitored. They'd be unwise to try anything so brazen." Gabe gave a tight smile. "Yeah," he murmured, stepping back. "Unwise." He left the bridge to return to the main deck, deciding not to stir panic among the family. From an outside perspective, the small fishing boat was just that, unremarkable. Gabe reached into his mind for everything he knew about maritime threats. He'd been in waters off the coast of Somalia dealing with pirates who used rickety skiffs to launch audacious hijackings. These pirates often targeted cargo ships with thin security. It was far from impossible for a pirate group to turn its sights on a luxury yacht, especially if they believed the ransom or loot to be worthwhile. Still, part of Gabe chastised himself for being overcautious. Rich families do enjoy the freedom of the open sea without constant fear. He tried to muster a sense of calm. Dinner was soon, and Victoria was likely getting ready, maybe freshening up in their stateroom. He moved down a spiral staircase to the lower deck where polished floors reflected overhead lights. The corridor here was carpeted in plush navy blue with framed artwork of ocean scenes adorning the walls. At the end of the hall, he found their stateroom. The door stood slightly ajar, and inside he heard the rustle of fabric. "Vic," he called gently, stepping inside. She sat at a dressing table, carefully brushing her long hair. A soft lamp illuminated her reflection in the mirror. She looked over her shoulder and smiled. "Hey you," she greeted. "You look worried." Gabe hesitated before responding. "It's probably nothing, but I saw a fishing boat on the horizon." Called the captain's attention to it. "It's just, well, it struck me as out of place." Victoria placed her brush down, a note of concern forming between her brows. "Do you think there's any reason to be alarmed? Maybe you should tell Dad." He shook his head. "I don't want to stir him up unless there's a clear threat. The captain's got an eye on it." Forcing a smile, he stepped behind Victoria, gently resting his hands on her shoulders. "Anyway, I'd rather focus on tonight. I heard they're bringing in fresh fish from the last island port for dinner." She relaxed under his touch, but the question still lingered in her eyes. "Promise me you'll tell me if there's something I should worry about?" "I promise," he said, leaning down to kiss the top of her head. "Come on, let's get ready for dinner. We'll have a beautiful evening." Despite his words, dread continued gnawing at Gabe. As he dressed, pulling on a short-sleeved button-down and a pair of pressed linen trousers, he recalled the pirates he had once observed while deployed. They didn't care how big or fast a ship was. If they smelled a score, they would come. He also remembered that sometimes pirates were local fishermen who had turned to a more dangerous living in desperate times. The fact that so much money was floating around the Caribbean with yachts like the Standish families must be an enticing prospect. He prayed he was wrong, that the boat would fade away into the gathering dusk, never to be seen again. An hour later, the main deck had been transformed into an elegant dining space. Strings of discreet lights lined the rails and overhead columns. A long table draped in fine white linens waited for the guests, set with silverware and fine china. A personal chef hired for the trip was busy orchestrating the final touches on the feast in the galley. Soft music played from a hidden sound system, blending with the tranquil hush of waves lapping the yacht's hull. Victoria stepped out in a graceful white summer dress that fluttered around her ankles. Gabe couldn't help but admire how effortlessly she blended into this world of privileged comfort. When she saw him, her eyes sparkled, but he noticed that subtle inquiry again, a silent question if everything was okay. He simply gave a slight nod of reassurance. Around them, the other guests gathered. Cassandra wore a flowing floral dress, and Andrew sported a linen blazer over a crisp shirt. The remaining friends, two older couples and a younger one, settled in, sipping cocktails. One couple engaged Gabe in a half-hearted conversation about the upcoming wedding, but he gave polite, concise answers. His mind drifted. With each passing minute, the sun sank deeper and the sky transitioned from gold to purple, then to a velvety navy. Soon, the Caribbean night enveloped them, and the possibility that they might not see an approaching vessel loomed. Halfway through the first course, Andrew raised his glass. To family, he toasted, and to celebrating the engagement of Victoria and Gabe. May their union be as steady as these waters. Everyone clinked glasses. Gabe forced a smile and drank from a flute of chilled champagne. He appreciated Andrew's kind words, yet he couldn't discard the tension between his shoulder blades. The night air carried a faint tang of salt and something else, a sense of foreboding. The second course arrived, grilled fish with a lemon garlic sauce. The conversation grew lively, punctuated by laughter. Victoria's mother regaled everyone with a humorous anecdote from her earlier travels in Monaco. Just as the plates were being cleared, the captain suddenly emerged on deck. He approached Andrew discreetly, leaning to whisper something in his ear. Gabe spotted their exchange immediately. Andrew's face registered mild confusion, then concern. He rose from his seat, gesturing for the captain to follow him a few steps away off to the side of the deck. Though they tried to be inconspicuous, Gabe's alert eyes took in every nuance. He watched as Andrew's expression changed from mild worry to a more pronounced alarm. Cassandra, noticing her husband's absence, paused her story. "Is everything all right, dear?" she called. Andrew held up a hand, urging patience, but the glint in his eye caused silence to settle over the group. The chatter and laughter abated, replaced by an undertone of tension. Gabe excused himself from the table and approached them. Even without hearing the details, he sensed the gravity of the situation. The captain's posture was upright, and he was speaking in clipped, urgent tones. "What's going on?" Gabe asked in a low voice. Captain Henderson sighed. "I'm sorry to interrupt the dinner, Mr. Standish, but that fishing vessel we spotted earlier? It's on the move, and it's headed straight for us." Andrew ran a hand through his silver hair. Could be they want help? Or just passing by? His voice betrayed that he didn't fully believe what he was saying. Encounters at sea were not always innocent. He looked at Gabe, the unspoken question clear. "Is this serious?" "That's exactly what I'm worried about," Henderson continued. "They're on an intercept course. I've tried hailing them on the radio. No response." Gabe's jaw tightened. "What about the Coast Guard or local authorities?" "I've just put in a call to the Coast Guard station in Barbados. But who knows how soon they'll get out here. We're not close to the main shipping lanes." Andrew exhaled sharply. "All right," he said, trying to project calm, though his voice shook ever so slightly. "Let's not frighten everyone, but we need to be ready. If there's trouble..." The captain responded, "I can increase speed, perhaps steer us away." Gabe, recalling the range of small arms some pirates used, pictured the possibility of them giving chase with outboard engines or heavier weaponry. They could move fast. "We might buy some time," he allowed. "But if they're determined, they'll catch up." "Let's do it," Andrew resolved. "Better to make it clear we don't want them near us." As though on cue, the yacht's engines revved a moment later, causing a jolt through the vessel. The guests at the dinner table glanced around, confusion etched on their faces. Cassandra rose, her eyes darting from the captain to her husband. "Andrew," she prompted. Andrew forced a reassuring smile. "Just a slight detour, that's all. We'll maintain a little more distance from that fishing boat. No need for alarm." But the tension thickened noticeably, and the dinner that had once been so celebratory lost its sheen. The staff hurriedly cleared plates, fumbling in their haste. Victoria came over to Gabe. "Is this about the boat you mentioned earlier?" He nodded slightly. "They're heading our way." He didn't want to alarm her more than necessary, but he also refused to lie. "Captain's called the Coast Guard." Her eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "Do you really think they'd?" Gabe drew her into a comforting embrace. "I don't know," he said, "but it's good that we're not letting them get too close without reason." They stood in a tense huddle as the yacht picked up speed. Minutes ticked by in a slow, agonizing progression. Gabe kept his arm around Victoria, scanning the waters behind them. The moon rose, casting a pale glow over the expanse of the sea. Behind the yacht, a single silhouette appeared, closing distance. That battered fishing vessel was now unmistakable. From the lights shining in its cabin, it was clear that multiple figures were aboard. Suddenly, a bright spotlight erupted from the fishing boat, swinging in the direction of the Sapphire Dawn. Gabe felt Victoria jump at the sudden glare. He eased her behind him. Andrew turned to Henderson. "Can we outrun them?" The captain shook his head doubtfully. "We can try, but if they're heavily armed, they might fire warning shots. That's usually how these encounters start. They force us to slow down." "What if we shut off our lights entirely?" asked Andrew. "Go dark. It might buy a moment, but they know roughly where we are. And they appear to have night vision, or at least high-powered spotlights." Gabe's heart hammered. He hated the sense of powerlessness that threatened to overwhelm them, but a plan formed in his mind. The group needed to be prepared. If these were truly pirates, negotiation might be on the table, but there could also be violence. He turned to Andrew. "Do you have a safe room on board? A panic room, or anywhere the family could hide if it gets dangerous?" Andrew blinked, appearing momentarily flustered. We do have a storage area below deck with a sturdy lock near the engine room. It's not exactly a panic room, but it's hidden behind a false partition. We've never had to use it." Gabe gave a curt nod. "Keep that option in mind." He clenched his fists. "Let's see what they do next." Within minutes, the fishing boat drew close enough for them to see armed figures standing at the rail. One raised a rifle, and 3 flashes of light cracked through the night. Gunshots, muzzle flashes. The bullets hissed overhead, sending some of the guests shrieking and ducking for cover. Captain Henderson cursed under his breath, pulling the yacht's throttle back. "We have to stop. If we keep going, they'll start firing to kill." A hush of alarm swept across the deck. Cassandra clutched Andrew's arm, her face pale with terror. Victoria pressed herself against Gabe, trembling. "This can't be happening," she whispered. Gabe could feel her heart pounding as hard as his own. The radio crackled. A harsh, accented voice broke through. "Stop your engines. Prepare to be boarded." That was the command, echoing over a channel that the captain had been scanning. "Do not resist, or we will open fire again." The captain's lips pressed into a grim line. He looked at Andrew, who gave a slow, reluctant nod. The yacht's speed dropped, and the engines were brought to idle. Unease radiated through the group as they realized they had no real choice. Fleeing would only invite more gunfire. Gabe surveyed the deck. The guests were huddled together, eyes wide in shock. He saw the crew looking to one another, uncertain of what to do next. And in the pit of his stomach, Gabe felt fury building. But he had to keep a level head. If he acted impulsively, these people, including Victoria, could end up dead. In the tension-filled silence, the fishing boat drew alongside the Sapphire Dawn with surprising agility. Hooks and ropes were tossed. Within moments, half a dozen armed men vaulted onto the yacht's deck, their weapons scanning the space. They wore mismatched clothing, bandanas, and some had their faces partially covered by scarves. The leader, a tall figure with a scar running across his cheek, barked orders in Spanish-laced English, motioning for everyone to gather in one spot. One of the pirates, brandishing an assault rifle, fired a burst into the air. "Get down! Everyone on the floor!" Screams erupted among the guests. Chairs clattered as they scrambled to comply. Cassandra crouched, shielding her head with her arms. Victoria looked at Gabe, who gave her a significant glance, a mix of stay calm and wait for an opening. She knelt beside her mother, glancing back only to confirm Gabe followed suit. Andrew, trembling with rage and fear, sank to his knees, raising his arms in a gesture of compliance. Gabe lowered himself as well, but not entirely. He kept one knee on the deck, his hands visible, and studied the intruders' faces. They moved with a practiced efficiency. This was not their first time hijacking a boat. He watched the leader, the man with the scar, issue commands. Then he noticed a shorter man rummaging through an equipment box on the deck, evidently searching for valuables or weapons. Another pirate forced Henderson to stand, pressing a gun to his back. "Where's the radio?" the pirate demanded. "No calls or we shoot." Henderson remained tight-lipped, but the muzzle dug deeper into his ribs. Inside, he finally conceded. "In the bridge. I'll show you." The pirate roughly guided him while the rest spread out to subdue the remaining crew members. One of the staff tried to speak, but he was struck with the butt of a rifle, leaving him groaning and clutching his face. The dinner guests whimpered in horror. Another shot cracked the air, courtesy of a jumpy pirate trying to control the scenario with fear. Gabe's mind raced. He couldn't fight them all in a straight-up gun battle, not while they held the advantage. He glanced at the edge of the deck where the dark water shimmered faintly in the moonlight. With the chaos swirling, none of the pirates were looking at him specifically. They were more focused on Andrew, presumably the yacht's owner, or on the captain. The pirates had no idea who Gabe was or that he had the training to be a lethal adversary. A possible plan flitted into his mind. If he could slip into the water unseen, he might come back on board undetected from a different angle, turning the pirates' advantage into a vulnerability. He measured the distance to the railing. If he leapt over the side now, the splash would draw attention. He needed a distraction. Quietly, he reached into his pocket where he had a small multi-tool he always carried, not exactly a weapon, but better than nothing. He flicked a glance at Victoria, silently willing her to remain calm. He longed to whisper a plan to her, but the pirates towered over them. Any hushed conversation risked an assault rifle pointed at her head. Scarface advanced, his eyes sweeping over the cowering passengers. "We want jewelry, money, electronics," he said in thickly accented English. "And we want your cooperation. If you do what we say, nobody dies." He motioned for one of his men to gather the guests' phones and wallets in a duffel bag. Another commandeered a rope to bind the hands of those nearest. When the pirate with the rope reached Gabe, he hesitated, flicking the muzzle of his rifle at him. "Hands out," the pirate barked. Gabe had no choice. He raised both hands. The man looped the rope around Gabe's wrists. Gabe tensed every muscle, anticipating the moment the pirate might look away. But he didn't. The pirate expertly knotted the rope, leaving Gabe's arms bound. A wave of frustration surged in Gabe's chest. If only he had 2 seconds alone, he could handle at least 1 or 2 of them. But there were 6, maybe more still on their boat. One by one, the pirates tied the guests' hands. They moved to the staff next, forcing them onto their knees. Meanwhile, Scarface rifled through a black bag that one of his men had carried aboard. From it, he withdrew cable ties and extra ammunition. It was a chilling display of organization. These men were prepared for more than petty theft. Perhaps they planned to hold the family for ransom or even steal the yacht. The terrifying possibilities mounted. Captain Henderson reemerged, hands raised, escorted by the pirate who had taken him to the bridge. The radio handset was in the pirate's grasp, presumably disabled or smashed. Scarface's eyes glinted with triumph. In Spanish, one of the pirates said to Scarface, "They can't call for help now." Scarface nodded. In accented English again, he barked, "We stay the night. If your family or your crew tries to do anything, we kill you. Clear." Nods and murmurs of compliance followed. The pirates forced everyone to lie face down on the deck, tying ankles together for some. Gabe's arms, bound in front, pressed against the polished boards. His mind spun with potential strategies. He needed an opportunity to slip away, if only a single moment to get free. The quiet that followed was punctured by the pirates' movements as they rummaged through the yacht, searching for valuables. Occasionally, a muffled whimper or a cry escaped one of the guests. Gabe caught Andrew's eye from across the deck. The older man's face displayed equal parts terror and fury. Despite the situation, there was a glimmer of trust there. Andrew knew Gabe was their best chance. But neither man could act yet. Tom stretched agonizingly. Gabe's wrists ached from the rope cutting into his skin. He watched the motion of the sea beyond the rails, waiting for the pirates to grow complacent. Eventually, one of them, a wiry man with a bandana, approached. "You," he barked at Gabe. On your feet? Gabe's heart pounded. He rose slowly, arms bound, keeping his face impassive. The pirate pointed the muzzle of his rifle at Gabe's chest. Where's the weapons locker? This is Big Yacht. Rich Yacht. You must have guns, he demanded. We don't have any, Gabe lied calmly. Just a flare gun for emergencies. This is a private family vessel, not a cargo ship. The pirate sneered. Flare gun? Show me. Gabe led him across the deck, feeling the prickle of adrenaline surging through his veins. His mind churned with potential ways to use a flare gun, but first he had to see if the pirates were foolish enough to hand him an opportunity. Reaching the storage locker, Gabe nodded for the pirate to open it. The man shoved him aside, rummaging through spare life jackets, a stack of towels, and a box of flares. He pulled out the flare gun, examining it like it might be a toy or an antique. You were telling truth, the pirate said, smirking. He stuffed the flare gun into his belt. Waste of time. Get back on the floor. As Gabe turned, something unexpected happened. Two of the pirates, seemingly overconfident, were focused on rummaging for valuables inside the main cabin. The deck was momentarily under the watch of only the wiry man with the bandana plus one other near the hostages. This might be Gabe's only shot. He watched as the wiry pirate kicked the storage locker closed. The man then turned his head to shout something at his cohort. In that fractional second, Gabe twisted his body and struck the pirate's wrist with a precise side blow, forcing the muzzle of the rifle away from his face. The gun clattered to the deck, sliding a few feet. But the pirate recovered fast, snarling as he swung a wild punch that connected with Gabe's shoulder. Gabe staggered but used the momentum to ram his bound arms upward, catching the pirate under the chin with a vicious upward thrust. The man stumbled, cursing. Gabe dove for the railing. If he tried to continue the fight, the other pirate would shoot him immediately. A flurry of shouting erupted. The second pirate was already aiming. In a desperate burst, Gabe vaulted the railing, diving headlong into the dark Caribbean water below. The rope around his wrists burned, but he ignored the pain. As he plunged into the sea, bullets tore the surface around him. A muffled roar of rifle fire thundered in his ears. Bubbles obscured his vision, but he kicked hard, propelling himself away from the yacht's hull. The pirate's shouting was muffled beneath the water, replaced by the ocean's hiss. Inside the yacht, the family heard the gunfire and realized Gabe had made a break for it. Now they could only hope he escaped the hail of bullets. Victoria's heart thundered, fearing the worst even as she clung to the desperate belief that Gabe, her quiet, capable Marine, might be their only chance for salvation. Gabe slid through the water in a practiced, fluid motion, letting his military training take over. The rope binding his wrists hampered him, but not completely. He inhaled only after he'd glided several yards away from the yacht, carefully surfacing behind the stern where the pirates might not immediately see him. The night sky was a canopy of stars, but there was just enough moonlight to reveal the shape of the yacht's hull and the smaller silhouette of the pirates' fishing boat tethered alongside. Cautious, he listened for the hiss of bullets or the shouts of men scanning the water. The pirates had definitely seen him jump. They'd likely assume he was unarmed and fleeing, hoping to survive. They might not realize that slipping overboard was more than an act of desperation, it was a potential turning of the tide. These men had no idea how lethal Gabe could be once he was underwater, free to maneuver. He sucked in slow, careful breaths, scanning for vantage points on the yacht. Bright lights still illuminated portions of the deck, but the lower hull was darker. Meanwhile, the pirates' voices were raised, laced with frustration. Gabe caught snippets an angry Spanish curse, then English. "He can't have gone far," one yelled. A second voice responded, "Shoot if you see movement in the water." Pulse thundering, Gabe contemplated his next move. If he stayed afloat behind the yacht, he'd be an easy target once they began searching with flashlights or spotlights. He had to move. Gently, he ducked below the surface again. Even bound, he possessed strong legs and a disciplined approach to swimming. He used a modified side stroke, scissoring his legs. He circled around the starboard side, where a line of portholes glimmered faintly. Possibly, he could re-enter the yacht through one of them or the side door used by the crew to deploy smaller tenders. But he had to sever the rope first, or at least loosen it. Surfacing again, Gabe spotted the pirates' fishing boat, bobbing lightly. A short distance away, near the stern, the reflection of a small fiberglass dinghy used by the yacht's crew caught his eye. Typically, these dinghies were kept on deck or stored in a small hold. However, sometimes a secondary, older tender was left floating behind the yacht for quick errands or trash disposal. If it was within reach, perhaps he could find something sharp there. He pressed forward, feeling the burn in his arms and shoulders. The saltwater aggravated the rope's friction against his wrists. His mind churned with the knowledge that any sudden splash could alert the pirates. Slowly, in near silence, he made his way to the floating dinghy. With minimal noise, he tested its tether. As luck would have it, the dinghy was tied to a small cleat. Gabe caught the side, hoisting himself up just enough to rummage inside. A life jacket, a folded tarp, a single oar, and at the bottom, near the transom, he found a small toolbox. Heart-pounding, Gabe carefully extracted a short utility knife from it. Perfect. It took an agonizing minute of awkward maneuvering to cut his bindings. Relief flooded him the moment he felt the rope fall away. Quietly, he peeled the remains of the rope off his wrists, wincing at the red welts that had already formed. Now, he told himself, the real operation begins. From his vantage point on the dinghy, he peered up at the yacht's deck. He could see two pirates patrolling, rifles in hand. One was the wiry man he had fought earlier. He seemed furious, scanning the water with a flashlight. Another, heavier-set pirate was near the main gathering of hostages, presumably ensuring no one else tried anything. Gabe's thoughts pivoted to Victoria. She would be terrified and likely blaming herself for dragging him on this trip. No matter, he couldn't let fear or guilt distract him. Focus. He mentally reviewed possible infiltration strategies. Reboarding at water level, perhaps through a side door, was one possibility. Another was climbing the anchor chain or scaling the yacht's underside to a lower deck if a suitable spot existed. The biggest hurdle was the pirates themselves. He needed better weapons than a short knife. He considered the fishing boat the pirates had used to approach. If it contained their supplies, including additional guns or ammunition, perhaps he could commandeer something from it first. But that meant dealing with whoever was left on board. A risky proposition without a firearm of his own. Then again, a stealth approach might catch them off guard. He lowered himself back into the water, leaving the dinghy to bob gently behind him. Methodically, he swam toward the fishing boat's stern. The battered hull smelled of diesel fuel. The engine was still idling, a low rumble that vibrated through the water. The deck of the pirate boat was about 3 feet above him, with netting and gear strewn across it. In the dim moonlight, he spotted a single figure leaning over the railing, scanning the waters. Another pirate, presumably. He needed to take him out quietly if he wanted to board. Gabe inhaled, mentally visualizing how he'd done infiltration missions in the past. Slip up behind the target, one arm around the neck, the other with a blade at the throat, all in a single fluid motion. The target barely had time to gurgle before going limp. It was ugly, but these men had come to kill and terrorize. He couldn't hesitate. He had to neutralize them to save the hostages. He listened intently. The pirate on guard cursed under his breath, complaining about El Maldito Gringo, who jumped overboard, apparently mocking how insane Gabe was to leap. Another voice answered from inside the boat's cabin. They were on alert, but they also believed he had fled to the open sea, underestimating that he might circle back. Good. Inhaling deeply for calm, Gabe pushed off the hull and used a single silent stroke to move behind the unsuspecting pirate. With one hand, he gently gripped a groove in the hull. The fishing boat's rough exterior gave him enough purchase to hoist his chin above deck level. He saw a pair of battered boots, baggy trousers, and a weapon, an ancient AK-47, slung across the man's torso. Gabe lunged. The boat swayed slightly with his momentum, but not enough to raise an alarm instantly. He hooked an arm around the man's leg, yanking him violently over the rail. The pirate toppled forward with a strangled cry, crashing into the water. Before the man could shout again, Gabe stabbed the utility knife upward, once, twice, precise as he'd been trained. The water churned red. The pirate's body convulsed in Gabe's grip, then went limp, swallowed by the dark sea. Gabe's heart hammered. Lethal force was not something he used lightly, but these men had forced his hand. He froze, listening. A muffled exclamation came from inside the boat. They might have heard the noise. Without hesitation, Gabe pulled himself over the side, landing lightly on the deck. Another pirate was stepping out from the small cabin to investigate. Gabe sprang forward. The pirate's eyes went wide, but before he could raise his weapon, Gabe closed the distance. He slammed the man's wrist against the edge of the cabin door. The rifle fired a single round into the deck, sending sparks flying. Gabe followed with a strike to the temple, knocking the pirate out cold, or at least dazed. He quickly pressed his advantage, disarming him. Now Gabe had a weapon. He snatched up the battered AK-47, quickly checking the safety and the magazine. 3/4 full. Good enough. He cast a quick glance at the unconscious pirate. Finishing him off was an option, but distasteful. The man might wake up and cause trouble, though. Grim resolve settled in Gabe's chest. He raised the butt of the rifle and hammered it down hard against the side of the pirate's head, ensuring he'd stay out of the fight for a good long while. Possibly forever. Anxious to avoid detection from the yacht, he ducked behind the boat's cabin. Through the windows, he spotted more firearms, at least 2 rifles, a shotgun, and a crate that might contain ammunition or grenades. A small metal chest was latched shut. He had no time to break it open. Instead, he slung a second rifle over his shoulder, ignoring the shotgun for now. The next question, get back on the yacht or wait for them to come to him? Gabe assessed the risk. The pirates on the yacht would realize soon that their compatriots weren't responding. They might come looking, or they might tighten security around the hostages. If they realized he had circled around to the fishing boat, they'd open fire. He needed to retake the yacht from within, neutralize them quickly, and avoid crossfire that could harm the hostages. Tightening his grip on the AK-47, Gabe hopped onto the narrow ledge at the fishing boat's bow and leapt back into the water, letting himself sink below the surface. He swam beneath the ropes tethering the 2 vessels, carefully approaching the yacht's stern, where the back platform was lowered for swimming and water sports. He moved as silently as possible, aware that any silhouette or sound could invite bullets. Reaching the yacht's stern platform, he paused. Overhead, a single floodlight illuminated the deck. He heard the pirates' agitated voices again. "Where's he?" one demanded. Another responded, "Impossible, he just vanished." They seemed to be pacing the deck, struggling to coordinate a search. He counted steps. 3, maybe 4 distinct footfalls. Possibly the rest were inside or guarding the hostages. Step by step, Gabe emerged from the water, placing his feet carefully on the stern platform to avoid splashes. His entire body dripped, salt water stinging his eyes, but adrenaline pushed aside all discomfort. With a measured breath, he raised the rifle, scanning left to right. Nobody on the immediate rear deck. That gave him a moment to move. He advanced quietly, slipping onto the main deck, hugging the wall next to a lounge area. The once festive fairy lights glowed ironically, as if mocking the terror that had overtaken the place. The door to the main lounge was open. From inside, he heard a harsh voice, Scarface, presumably barking orders. "Tie them down below in one room. If they cause trouble, shoot one as example." Goosebumps traveled across Gabe's arms. He took a slow, steadying breath. He had to move fast, but smart. He crept inside. The lounge was empty, but rummaged. Cushions overturned, cabinets flung open, valuables scattered. They'd been looting. At the far end, the corridor led to the forward cabins. The pirates must have corralled the hostages there. He advanced, rifle at the ready. Near the corridor, the wiry pirate from before, Bandana Man, stood guard. Still furious from Gabe's earlier escape, he peered into the corridor, evidently listening to Scarface's instructions. He had no idea Gabe was now behind him. Gabe raised the AK-47, aiming at center mass. He hesitated for a second. The man's back was turned, no immediate threat. But if Gabe tried to subdue him physically again, he risked a struggle and noise. The mission was bigger than his conscience about lethal force. These men had threatened everyone he cared about. With a deep breath, Gabe squeezed the trigger. A short burst of gunfire rattled through the lounge, bullets striking the pirate's torso. The man collapsed, releasing a strangled cry. Blood spattered the pristine wall. Gabe's ears rang. Silence followed, save for the echoes of gunshots. Then the yacht exploded into noise. The other pirates yelled in alarm. Doors slammed. Footsteps thundered. Gunfire crackled as at least 2 pirates began firing blindly down the corridor. Gabe ducked behind an overturned table, bullets ripping through the lounge. He quickly assessed how to approach. The corridor was narrow, a choke point. If the pirates had hostages close, he couldn't just spray bullets. He needed to move methodically but also swiftly before they organized a counterattack. He peeked around the corner, muzzle flashes erupted. He saw the muzzle of an automatic rifle braced at the corridor's end. A bullet ricocheted off the floor near him. He jerked back. "Throw your weapon and come out," a pirate demanded from the corridor. "We kill them if you not come." In that instant, Gabe heard a faint whimper from behind the corridor door, possibly Victoria or one of the guests. A cold sweat broke across his brow. The pirates were threatening to shoot hostages. He couldn't let that happen. He fumbled at his belt for anything else. His pockets were almost empty except for the multi-tool. But he noticed a small gap in the lounge's side, a door leading to a secondary hallway that connected to the cabins from another angle. If he circled around, he might catch the pirates from behind or from a more advantageous angle. Before they could threaten the hostages further, Gabe slid across the lounge, bullets whizzing overhead. The pirates must have spotted his movement because more gunfire burst in his direction. He rolled behind a built-in bar, panting. Glasses on the shelf shattered, showering him with fragments. He clenched his teeth, ignoring small cuts, and forced himself to keep moving. Rolling onto his feet, he pushed open the small door that led to the secondary hallway. This hallway was dim and narrow, used mostly by crew for discreet service. The carpet muffled his steps. He advanced, chest tight, adrenaline surging. Every sense sharpened. He could smell the acrid tang of gun smoke drifting through the yacht. He could taste fear on his tongue. Rounding a corner, he found a short flight of stairs heading to the lower deck. He knew from the yacht's layout that the corridor connecting the forward cabins looped. If the pirates had corralled the hostages in the forward lounge or one of the large suites, he could potentially ambush from behind. He heard Scarface's distinct voice echo, "We need him alive, or we kill them all, you hear me?" Another pirate responded in broken English that they'd find him, that he was pinned in the lounge. They obviously had no idea he was circling around. Tension coiled in Gabe's muscles as he crept closer. Even with the advantage, it was many against one. But element of surprise was on his side. He couldn't waste it. He reached the door to the forward lounge. Through a crack, he glimpsed the hostages bound, frightened, and on their knees. Andrew, Cassandra, Victoria, and the others were huddled together. Scarface stood near them, brandishing his rifle. Another pirate hovered at the lounge's entry, peering out to the main corridor where Gabe had unleashed gunfire. 2 additional pirates might be present, their voices from somewhere deeper in the suite. Gabe's mind spun with possibilities. If he burst in shooting, he risked hitting a hostage or giving Scarface time to retaliate. If he caused a diversion, maybe a thrown object, he might draw 1 or 2 pirates away. That was a gamble. Another option, a careful shot from the door, taking Scarface first. The risk was that the other pirates might reflexively fire at the hostages. He swallowed hard, forcing the scenario to play out in his head. He scanned the floor. A heavy vase stood on a small side table. If he could hurl it down the corridor, it might create a noise from the opposite side, drawing attention away from the door. Then he could slip in and neutralize Scarface. Carefully, Gabe lifted the vase, wincing at the weight. This had to be precise. He eased the door open an inch more. The pirate at the lounge entrance was stepping back, uncertain if he should help his comrades in the corridor or stay with Scarface. Gabe slid the vase around the door, aiming for the corner of the corridor. He hurled it and it smashed with a resounding crash. Instantly, both pirates snapped their heads in that direction. The one in the entrance took a step forward, raising his rifle to investigate. Seizing the moment, Gabe swept into the room. He aimed at Scarface's center mass. Scarface spun, but not fast enough. Gabe squeezed the trigger, unleashing a burst that struck Scarface across the chest. The pirate stumbled back, eyes wide, then collapsed to the floor. Blood spread rapidly on his shirt. A savage satisfaction flared in Gabe. The man who had threatened to kill them all was now neutralized. The other pirate, the one at the lounge door, whirled, returning fire. Bullets tore through the air. One ricocheted off the floor near the hostages. Andrew shouted in alarm, covering Cassandra with his body. Another bullet sliced through the padded lounge chair, sending stuffing flying. Gabe ducked behind a decorative column, bracing the rifle. He heard Victoria's gasp, an agonized sound that tore at him. He had to end this quickly before stray bullets hurt someone. He leaned out, firing a controlled burst. The pirate jerked, taking 2 rounds to the chest, and dropped. Silence. Gabe's breath thundered in his ears. He scanned the area, finger tense on the trigger. Scarface lay unmoving in a widening pool of blood. The second pirate also appeared dead. Andrew, Cassandra, and the others gaped in shock, blinking at Gabe like he was some specter. But there was no time to rejoice. 2 more pirates had been unaccounted for. Suddenly, footsteps pounded behind him. Gabe spun, raising his rifle just in time to see a pirate rush in from the corridor. Their eyes locked. The pirate squeezed the trigger, but Gabe dropped to a crouch, returning fire. Sparks lit the hallway in a bright strobe. The pirate pitched forward, bullets ripping into his torso. He crashed face first, his rifle clattering on the tiles. A strangled gasp came from the corridor beyond. Another pirate was there, presumably the last, raising a pistol. Before Gabe could aim, the pirate darted back, footsteps echoing down the hall. Gabe exhaled, glancing over his shoulder at the hostages. "Stay down," he ordered. "I'll be back." He sprinted to the corridor, stepping over the fallen man, ignoring the bullet shells scattered on the floor. The last pirate was fleeing, perhaps to the deck or the bridge. Gabe followed, cautious but determined not to let him regroup or retake any ground. Rounding a corner, Gabe found the corridor empty but spattered with blood. The door leading to the main deck hung ajar. He heard a scuffle outside, a voice cursing. Then a single gunshot. Gabe lunged for the door. Bursting onto the deck, he scanned left and right. There, near the rail, the last pirate was hoisting a small staff member, pressing a pistol to the man's temple. The staffer whimpered, eyes wide in terror. "Stop," the pirate shouted at Gabe. He was trembling, desperate. "I kill him." The pirate held the staff as a human shield, aiming the pistol over the man's shoulder. A savage wind whipped across the deck, carrying the scent of salt and blood. Gabe froze, rifle aimed but no clear shot. The staffer's body blocked him. The pirate sidled toward the fishing boat's tether, evidently seeking an escape. "You let me go, or he dies," the pirate growled. Gabe's mind whirled. The staffer's life hung in the balance. For a beat, no one moved. Then the staffer, with unexpected bravery, twisted, elbowing the pirate in the ribs. The pirate's shot went wild, firing harmlessly into the air. Gabe seized the split second. He fired once, a single shot to the pirate's head. The man dropped, the staffer staggering away, eyes wide with shock. And just like that, the deck fell silent. No more threats or shouting. Only the endless wash of waves against the hull. Gabe's shoulders sagged as the weight of it all crashed over him. Panting, he turned to the staffer, who stared at him with something akin to awe. "You okay?" Gabe asked. The staffer nodded, trembling, tears in his eyes. "Yes, thank you." Gabe looked around. Bodies of pirates lay strewn across the yacht, some dead, some severely wounded or unconscious. The fishing vessel was still tethered. By his count, he had neutralized all the ones who boarded +2 on the boat. He had to be sure there weren't more. Warily, he moved along the deck, rifle at the ready. The starry sky provided an almost surreal contrast to the carnage. Sensing no further threats, Gabe rushed back inside to the forward lounge. There, he found Andrew, Cassandra, Victoria, and the rest of the hostages still bound. Blood spattered the floor from Scarface's fatal wound. Victoria's face lit with relief the moment she saw Gabe. She choked back a sob. "You're alive," she whispered. He nodded, kneeling beside her. With shaking hands, he cut through her bindings, pulling her into a tight embrace. She clung to him as if she never intended to let go. Tears streaked her face, but she managed a small, breathless laugh of joy. Andrew and Cassandra wore looks of astonishment and gratitude. Gabe swiftly cut their ropes as well, then moved on to free everyone else. An eerie hush settled, broken by ragged sobs and exhalations of relief. The stench of gunpowder hung in the air. Andrew shakily stood, leaning on a piece of furniture for support. Are they all?" Gabe nodded grimly. "Yes, I believe so. Or incapacitated." He paused. "I'm sorry you all had to witness that." Andrew took a shaky step forward, grasping Gabe's shoulder. "You saved our lives," he murmured, his voice trembling. "You're not the one who should be apologizing." Cassandra and Victoria crowded around Gabe, hugging him in trembling relief. The other guests and crew expressed gratitude in hushed voices. Some were too shocked to speak. Gabe sighed, forcing composure. "We should check for stragglers, then contact the Coast Guard. Make sure it's safe." He turned to Captain Henderson, who just arrived, sporting a gash on his temple from being struck earlier. "Captain, the radio was destroyed. Do we have a backup or a satellite phone?" Henderson rubbed his head, wincing. "Yes, we have an emergency sat phone. It's in a locked box near the bridge." "I'll get it." A wave of relief washed over Gabe. "Good," he said. "Make that call. Let them know we were attacked, but the threat is neutralized. We'll need medical assistance for the wounded, but also for the shock and trauma." He looked at the battered faces, the bruised wrists, the tear-streaked cheeks. Healing from this would take time. Before the captain left, Gabe put a hand on his arm. "Also, I need a head count. Let's make sure we're not missing anyone." Henderson nodded and departed, voice cracking over the calm he struggled to maintain. Despite the victory, Gabe couldn't fully exhale yet. The scenario was like a waking nightmare, the bodies, the blood, the memory of gunfire. He turned back to Victoria, who was cradling her mother, attempting to soothe her. "You sure you're okay?" he asked, gently brushing a strand of hair away from her face. She looked at him, eyes brimming with tears. "You saved us. I can't believe this happened." She leaned her head against his chest. "I was so scared you wouldn't come back." He cupped her cheek, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I promised I'd protect you," he said softly. And though the pirates lay defeated, a leaden sense of responsibility settled on him. That vow encompassed not just this moment, but every moment ahead. As they tried to calm one another, the soft hum of the fishing boat's engine shifted pitch. Someone still aboard was revving it. Gabe froze, rifle in hand, scanning the deck. Could there be a survivor seeking revenge, or an unknown accomplice arriving? The tension spiked anew, and everyone realized this nightmare might not yet be over. A sudden shift in the fishing boat's engine tone sliced through the tense stillness on deck. Gabe's muscles, already taut, clenched anew. He had just put down the last pirate who was holding a staff member at gunpoint, yet the unmistakable thrum of the pirate vessel's motor roared to life, accompanied by a distinct revving that sounded like someone was about to gun the throttle. Every nerve in Gabe's body was on edge. He scanned the deck to confirm that the pirates he had engaged were no longer a threat. Scarface lay in a pool of blood, the wiry bandana man near the lounge was dead, and the bodies of the other attackers were inert. A couple of them might still be breathing, but they'd been incapacitated enough to pose no immediate danger. Andrew, Victoria, Cassandra, and the others huddled in the forward lounge behind him, free of their restraints but still visibly shaken. Captain Henderson had left a moment earlier to retrieve the yacht's emergency satellite phone. Gabe pivoted toward the stern with the battered AK-47 in hand, heart hammering in his chest. How could there be anyone else left? He'd personally taken down at least 2 on the fishing boat, and the others had boarded the yacht. Unless, was there a stowaway or a second wave? He motioned to the staffer he'd just saved, an older man named Javier, to guide the family farther inside. "Take them below," Gabe whispered urgently. "Lock any interior door you can. If you see me coming, you open. If not, don't open for anyone." Javier nodded, eyes wide with lingering terror. He beckoned the others, shepherding them to a corridor that led deeper into the yacht. Victoria lingered, looking at Gabe anxiously. He forced a reassuring nod, though he was far from calm. "Go," he insisted. "I'll come back for you." A swirl of adrenaline propelled Gabe along the deck. He passed the lounge area with overturned chairs and bullet-ridden walls. Tiny shards of broken glass crunched underfoot. The faint breeze carried the smell of salt and gunpowder. Outside, overhead lights illuminated the stern enough to reveal the bobbing pirate boat tethered to the yacht's starboard side. He crouched near the rail, peering down. The fisherman's craft was listing slightly, the deck spattered with blood. Gabe's memory flashed to the kills he'd made in the water. 1 man drowned and stabbed, another subdued, plus the pair he'd encountered on board. That left the question, who was revving the engine? With the muzzle of the AK raised, Gabe inched closer to the starboard ladder. The fishing vessel's tether rope sagged into the water, indicating the boat was no longer flush with the yacht. It had drifted a few feet away. A single figure at the fishing boat's helm jerked the controls, swerving the boat in a half-circle. Gabe couldn't see the face clearly in the faint glow, but he saw a messy silhouette, the posture of someone who was possibly injured, struggling to maintain balance. Before Gabe could shout a warning or open fire, the intruder slammed the throttle forward. The old diesel engine coughed, then roared. Water churned behind the fishing boat in a froth of foam as it pulled away from the yacht. Gabe's finger hovered on the trigger, but he hesitated to fire blindly. The boat was veering erratically. If the driver was truly retreating, it might be best to let them go. However, if they circled back, it could be a problem. He kept his rifle aimed, tracking the movement. In seconds, the craft had disappeared into the night, leaving only the churned wake behind. An uneasy blend of relief and dread tugged at Gabe's gut. On one hand, the boat was gone, perhaps they were simply fleeing after losing so many men. But the knowledge that even one pirate had escaped left 1,000 haunting possibilities. Would he radio for reinforcements? Would he come back with a vengeance? Gabe's mind churned with the grim reality that a single survivor could cause unimaginable complications. The quiet that followed felt even more oppressive. The deck was a tableau of violence, bullet casings, blood smears, splintered wood. Gabe lowered his rifle but kept it clutched tightly. Step by step, he circled back, around, verifying that no immediate threat remained. He found 2 wounded pirates near the port side, both unconscious. One had a gunshot to the abdomen, the other to the leg. They might die without medical attention, or if they survived, they could be key to unraveling more about who these attackers were and whether they had an organized network. Captain Henderson emerged from a hatch near the bridge, carrying a hard plastic case. "Mr. Warren," he called softly, his voice trembling with the aftershock. "I've got it. The phone." "Good," Gabe replied. His voice was tight, an undercurrent of tension that refused to subside. "We need to call for help. The rest are secured below." The captain approached cautiously, wincing at the sight of the bodies. He paused, glancing at the 2 unconscious pirates. "My God," he breathed. "I've never seen anything like this. Are we sure they're all handled?" "One got away," Gabe said. "Took the fishing boat. I don't know where he's headed." Henderson's expression darkened. "Could be a local port," he guessed, "or any number of smaller islands. We're not that far from a chain of Ks." Gabe nodded grimly. "All the more reason to call the authorities now. Their reinforcements might not be immediate, but we have to try. We have injured staff. Some of these pirates might need medical treatment if we want them alive for questioning." The captain pressed his lips into a line, then opened the case. Inside was a robust satellite phone with a short antenna. "I'll do it right now," he affirmed. His hands shook as he keyed in a direct line to the nearest maritime authority. In the background, the night silence felt thunderous. Gabe half listened to the call as Henderson identified the yacht, gave approximate coordinates, and relayed the events. Armed takeover, multiple casualties, a fleeing pirate boat. Gabe scanned the horizon, searching for any sign that the boat might be doubling back or that another craft lurked out there. Nothing. The dark sea looked deceptively calm. After a tense exchange, Henderson lowered the phone. "They're dispatching a Coast Guard vessel," he reported. "Could take hours to arrive, though." Gabe exhaled, exasperated. "Hours?" he repeated. "We might not be safe here for that long, especially if that survivor calls for backup." Henderson hesitated. "We could get underway," he said slowly, "but our radio is destroyed, and we have limited means of communicating while we sail. Still, if we head northeast, we'd be closer to the main shipping lanes, more likely to cross paths with patrols or other friendly boats." Gabe nodded, considering. "That might be best. Better than waiting like a sitting duck. Make sure we do a thorough sweep first. We can't have any stowaways left on board." He raised an eyebrow at the wounded pirates. "And we'll need to secure them, the ones who are unconscious." They walked over to the injured men. The first was breathing shallowly, eyes half-lidded, but alive. The second was limp, a bullet wound congealing around his thigh. Henderson grimaced at the sight. "We can tie them up in the storage area below deck," he suggested. "At least they can't do any more harm." Then he glanced at Gabe's rifle. "Unless you believe we should." Gabe shook his head. "Let them live if they can. We want answers, and I'm not in the business of killing unconscious prisoners." His voice held a firm finality. He could be ruthless when necessary, but not cruel. Together, they dragged each wounded pirate carefully, ensuring they were disarmed. Henderson used heavy nylon zip ties to secure their wrists and ankles. Gabe found an old tarp and pressed it against one man's abdomen to slow the bleeding. He still felt that complex, twisting guilt in the pit of his stomach. These men had attacked them mercilessly, threatened Victoria and her family, murdered at least one or two innocent staffers. Yet seeing them like this, helpless and bleeding, stirred an uneasy pity. Once they were locked in a small utility room, Gabe and Henderson took a moment to catch their breath. Sweat glistened on the captain's brow. "I'll get the engines going," he said. "Plot a course northeast, best speed we can manage. We'll keep that sat phone handy in case the Coast Guard calls back." "Good," Gabe replied. "I'll check on the family." The battered AK-47 still in hand, he stepped away from the utility room. His mind was half on autopilot now, methodically running through threat assessments and next steps. "This isn't over," a voice in his head warned. Even if the pirates on board were all down, the future loomed uncertain. At the stairwell leading to the lower cabins, he found Javier and the rest. Andrew clung to Cassandra, who was sobbing softly into his shoulder. Several other guests, pale-faced, eyes hollow, sat in a huddle on the floor, while a couple of staff members tried to comfort them. Victoria stood a short distance away, arms folded around herself. The moment she saw Gabe, relief broke across her features, but her eyes also shone with lingering fear. He approached her, and she reached for him. "Thank God," she murmured, voice shaky. "I heard the engine revving and thought they'd come back for us." He pulled her close. "They haven't. One might have escaped. We don't know if he's gone for good." Her grip on his arm tightened. "Is it safe to come up now?" she asked, glancing behind him. He nodded. "Most of it. You'll see. Well, it's not pretty, Vic." He mentally braced her for the carnage. The bodies, the blood, bullet damage. But the immediate danger is over. Captain's getting the yacht underway. We'll meet the Coast Guard at sea. Andrew overheard and stepped forward, trying to appear strong even though his face was ashen. "Are you sure about moving before they arrive?" he asked. What if that pirate returns with more men?" "That's exactly why we're moving," Gabe said grimly. "We can't risk another ambush. The captain's plan is to head for shipping lanes. We'll have a better chance of spotting friendlies, or at least scaring off another attack." A low hush settled over the group, broken by Cassandra's anxious sniffle. Gabe placed a hand gently on Andrew's shoulder. "I'm sorry about what happened tonight," he said, feeling the weight of it all. "But we made it. You're all alive." Andrew's throat bobbed. "Because of you," he acknowledged. "We owe you everything." Gabe shook his head. "We're not out of the woods yet. Let's focus on next steps." They ascended, moving carefully through the lounge. A few people gasped at the stark gore. The guests fanned out, some still teetering on the edge of panic, others going numb with shock. Cassandra covered her mouth, staring at the bullet holes in the walls. Andrew paled at the sight of Scarface's body. Victoria shuddered but took a deep, fortifying breath, leaning on Gabe's arm for support. Gabe quickly gathered them all in a relatively clear section near the yacht's stern lounge. "We have to maintain calm," he said, scanning their tense expressions. "We'll lock down these bodies, secure the weapons, and keep watch. Captain Henderson says the Coast Guard might take hours, so we're heading out. Everyone, stay close. We don't know if there are more threats." The staff members nodded with a certain gratitude. They knew Gabe was their best chance. Andrew, still outwardly collected for his family's sake, said, "We'll do whatever you say." Victoria's eyes flicked over the side of the yacht. "And if that boat does come back?" Gabe steadied his tone. "We'll be ready. I won't let them get near you again. But for now, let's hope they're gone for good." A pang of uncertainty quivered in his gut. Am I lying to reassure her? Or do I truly believe it? His gaze drifted to the horizon. The rolling black ocean, the silver sheen of moonlight, and the chilling possibility of unseen adversaries. Yes, he'd beaten back this assault, but the night felt endless, and a single engine out there had roared away, carrying the potential for vengeance. A single beep from the sat phone startled them all. Captain Henderson answered, his face turning grim. He covered the mouthpiece and glanced at Gabe. "They're picking up a faint distress call," he whispered. It's coming from somewhere in these waters, but they can't confirm the source." Gabe's eyes narrowed. "A distress call out here, right now? It might be a coincidence, or it might be the lure of a second trap." The salty wind lashed at Gabe's face as he leaned over the yacht's starboard rail, scanning the moonlit horizon. The sat phone perched on a nearby table emitted static-laden noise as Captain Henderson tried to clarify the nature of that mysterious distress call. Occasionally, fragments of a man's voice flickered through the receiver, a language that might have been Spanish, but heavily distorted by interference. Andrew, Cassandra, Victoria, and the handful of shaken guests remained in the open lounge area, warily eyeing the darkness. The yacht's engines rumbled beneath their feet as Henderson guided the boat northeast at a moderate clip, wanting both speed and enough caution to avoid any hidden hazards in these less-traveled waters. "A second boat out there?" Andrew speculated, arms folded across his chest. His posture was tense, his shoulders drawn up. Could it be that the same pirate who fled is faking a distress call, trying to lure us? "It's possible," Gabe admitted, expression grim. "Or it might be a genuine emergency. But given what we've been through, we have to assume the worst." He pivoted to Henderson, who stood near the helm with the phone pressed to his ear. "What are they saying, Captain?" Henderson's brow furrowed. "It's very garbled. I keep hearing something about fire and need help. It could be they're talking about a smaller craft that's taking on water." He paused, listening intently to crackling static. "But the signal is weak. They might be miles away. The Coast Guard asked if we can get a heading on it." Gabe exhaled slowly, weighing options. If it were any other night, he'd tell the captain to set a course to help those in trouble. Maritime law and basic decency encouraged assisting a distressed vessel. But these waters had turned treacherous. The pirates' brazen assault still hung fresh in everyone's mind. "Could the signal be from that fishing boat?" Victoria asked, stepping forward. Her voice trembled slightly. "Maybe something went wrong with their engine?" Henderson shrugged. "Hard to be certain. The accent might match that region, but not conclusive. The Coast Guard recommended we keep an eye out for flares or lights." In the hush that followed, Gabe sensed the group's collective anxiety. The pirates had decimated their sense of safety. He could almost see the debate forming in Andrew's eyes. Should we be the good Samaritan we always saw ourselves as? Or should we protect our own? Despite the tension, Victoria spoke quietly. "We can't ignore a real distress call, can we?" Gabe glanced at her. Even after everything, she still had empathy. a pang of admiration mixed with a fierce protective instinct. "We'll look," he said, "but from a safe distance. If it's a setup, we're not taking the bait. If it's real, we'll relay coordinates to the Coast Guard." He turned to Henderson. "Let's slow enough to sweep the area with spotlights. Keep our distance from anything suspicious." Henderson nodded. I'll pivot a bit eastward. The Coast Guard said they think the signal is coming from that direction." Andrew stepped closer to Gabe, speaking in a low voice. "Whatever you decide, we support you," he said earnestly. The older man's face bore fresh lines of worry. I need to know Victoria is safe." Gabe's chest tightened. "I understand, sir. I'll handle it carefully." He offered a reassuring hand squeeze, then turned back to the group. "Everyone who's not essential to navigation should stay inside. Keep away from windows if you can, just in case. Lock doors behind you." Victoria lingered, her gaze imploring. "What about you?" "I'll be fine," Gabe replied. "I promise. I'll stay on deck to keep watch." He reached out, gently guiding her toward the interior corridor. "Please, I need to know you're all in a secure spot." She didn't argue further, sensing the urgency in his voice. Cassandra, pale and trembling, followed, and Andrew brought up the rear. The other guests likewise filed indoors, seeking the relative safety of enclosed space. That left Gabe, Henderson, and a couple of staffers who volunteered to help keep an eye out. The yacht's bow angled slightly, changing course. The engines dropped a few hundred RPMs, their rumble becoming less intense. Henderson activated the forward spotlight, a powerful beam that cut across the dark waters in a wide sweep. It highlighted the gentle waves, gleaming lines of silver. Every few seconds, Henderson paused the beam, rotating it to the next arc. Gabe stood at the bow, the confiscated rifle slung across his back. His entire body thrummed with watchful tension. If a strange vessel appeared, he'd be the first to see it. Minutes ticked by in eerie silence, save for the murmur of the engine and the rhythmic churn of water along the hull. Gabe found himself straining to catch any shape, any flicker of movement. The moon had shifted behind thin clouds, diminishing the natural glow. Another minute passed, then another. He half expected gunfire to erupt from some hidden corner of the ocean. Suddenly, Henderson's voice crackled from the overhead speaker by the bow. "Gabe, I see something. Bearing starboard, about half a mile." Gabe swiveled, heart pounding. The spotlight beam had snagged on a faint silhouette. A small craft, maybe, hard to discern. He grabbed a pair of binoculars from a nearby stand and focused. At first, the shape looked like a partial hull, listing severely. As the spotlight slid off and then back on, he caught a clearer glimpse. It seemed to be a small boat, possibly a runabout or a dinghy, half submerged. With measured haste, Gabe hustled to the bridge, where Henderson stood at the controls. The older man pointed out the window. "It's not that big," he murmured. "Certainly not the same fishing vessel. She's too small and sits too low in the water. Could it be an accident or sabotage?" "I see no sign of an engine," Gabe observed. "No lights, no occupant visible." He frowned, toggling the binoculars again. "Wait, I think I see something on board, but it's not moving." Henderson gulped. "Should I approach?" Gabe hesitated. This could indeed be a trap, but the craft might also hold genuine survivors. "Yes, but slow and with caution. Keep the spotlight on it, and be prepared to reverse engines if we see anything suspicious." He turned to a younger crew member who hovered in the corner, face white. "Omar, right? Get the staff together, stay alert. If I signal you, or if we come under fire, kill the lights and pull away." Omar swallowed hard, nodding. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The Sapphire Dawn glided toward the drifting boat at low speed, spotlight unwavering. As they neared, Gabe's eyes adjusted to the shape. The craft was indeed a small runabout, maybe 15 feet, with peeling blue paint. Part of the transom was torn away as if it had collided with something. The boat bobbed dangerously, taking on water with each wave. Still no signs of life. Then, within the stark glare of the spotlight, Gabe saw what looked like a man's limp form sprawled across a bench seat, half submerged in the water that sloshed inside the hull. "Stop engines," Gabe commanded. Henderson complied, letting the yacht coast to a near standstill. They floated within maybe 30 yards of the runabout. Gabe took a deep breath, then turned to Henderson and Omar. "I'll check it out," he said. "Cover me." With that, he unslung the AK-47 and tested its weight. He had a partially spent magazine. Enough for a firefight if it came to that. He slipped out onto the narrow side deck, stepping carefully to the rear swim platform. The memory of diving into these waters hours earlier flashed through his mind. He shuddered. No direct confrontation, that's what he hoped for. But no guarantee. A staffer named Rohan emerged, carrying a grappling hook and a rope. They exchanged a brief nod. Rohan ready to toss the rope if they needed to tow the small boat closer. From the water's edge, Gabe shouted, "Hello? Do you need assistance?" Only the faint lapping of waves answered. The figure in the boat didn't stir. Gabe's pulse hammered. This could be a dead body, or someone nearly drowned. Or maybe they're faking unconsciousness. Raising the rifle, Gabe motioned for Rohan to toss the rope. With surprising precision, Rohan lobbed the grappling hook into the runabout, catching the boat's rail. The runabout jerked a bit, then drifted closer. Slowly, foot by foot, Rohan reeled it in. Gabe kept his rifle trained on the occupant, scanning for any twitch. At last, the runabout bumped gently against the swim platform. Gabe's mouth felt dry. He crouched, hooking a foot under a rail for stability, and leaned over to see the occupant's face. A man, middle-aged, with a scraggly beard, eyes closed, lips parted. His clothing was soaked, and a congealed blotch of red marred his left side. A closer look revealed a bullet hole in the hull as well. "Hey!" Gabe tried again, voice low. He reached out with the barrel of the rifle, prodding the man's shoulder gently. No response. Gabe exhaled, risking a shift forward to press 2 fingers to the man's neck. A faint pulse met his touch, weak but present. "He's alive," Gabe murmured. "We need to get him on board." Carefully, he motioned to Rohan. "Pull him up, but watch out. I can't be sure he's not armed." Rohan nodded. Together, they hoisted the limp man out of the runabout. He weighed more than Gabe expected. His sodden clothes dragged with water. Once on the swim platform, they laid him on his back. Blood trickled from a ragged wound near his ribs. The man let out a feeble groan, eyes fluttering. Gabe patted him down, searching for weapons. All he found was an empty holster on the man's belt. Whatever gun he once carried was missing. With the immediate threat seemingly low, Gabe slung the rifle again. "Let's get him inside," he told Rohan. "Check for other passengers." Rohan leaned over the battered runabout. "No one else, sir. Just a bunch of bullet holes. Gas tank is empty or near empty." That hammered Gabe's suspicions. Bullet holes, empty holster, and a bullet wound? This man had been in a firefight or a chase. Possibly shot by the pirates? Possibly one of the pirates? Or maybe an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire. He dreaded the coincidence. If he was a pirate, it was better to lock him up. But if he was an innocent fisherman, they needed to save him. They carried the unconscious stranger to a small guest cabin near the lounge. The staff rummaged for a first aid kit, gauze, antiseptic, anything to stabilize him. Andrew and Cassandra, hearing the commotion, rushed to see. Victoria appeared, her expression etched with concern. "Who is he?" Victoria whispered, peeking into the cabin as a staffer pressed gauze to the man's side. Gabe shrugged. "Not sure. He's got a bullet wound, no ID, no gear except an empty holster. We found him drifting in that runabout." Andrew's eyes flicked to Gabe in alarm. "You think he's part of all this?" "Hard to say. He's unconscious." Gabe ran a hand through his damp hair. "We have 2 wounded pirates locked away in the utility room, so we can't rule out that this man was associated with them." Victoria hovered in the doorframe. "If he's innocent, we can't just. We'll treat him," Gabe assured her, "but we'll also keep a guard on him. If he wakes up and tries something, we won't be caught unawares." Andrew exhaled, reluctantly nodding. "All right." They stepped back as the staff began cleaning the wound. The man stirred, emitting a broken moan, then fell silent again. Outside, the battered runabout listed further, half sunk now that no one was bailing water. Meanwhile, the yacht's engines remained idle. Henderson's voice came over a small intercom on the wall. "Mr. Warren, do we proceed or wait here?" Gabe pressed the button. "Get us back on course. We did our due diligence. Bring that runabout along if you can, but if it sinks, let it go. We need to keep moving." A beat. "Understood." On the move again. A swirl of motion followed as the staff tried to re-establish some order after the chaos. They rolled pirate corpses into tarp wrappings. They scrubbed blood from the decks, if only to minimize the gruesome spectacle. Many of the guests locked themselves in private cabins, gripped by shock and terror, wanting no more part of this nightmarish scenario. Gabe, feeling the wear of battle and stress, realized he had no time to rest. He crouched next to Andrew and Victoria, who lingered outside the makeshift sick room. "You two should try to get some sleep," he suggested gently. "We'll probably sail all night." Andrew shook his head. "Sleep? Under these conditions? Unthinkable." Victoria folded her arms. "I'll try to lie down, but only if you do the same soon," she told Gabe. He offered a faint, humorless smile. "I might grab a quick rest once I'm sure we're secure." Even as he spoke, he knew his mind wouldn't let him sleep. Images of muzzle flashes, the smell of gunpowder, the memory of water slapping around him in the darkness. Once Andrew and Victoria retreated to a nearby stateroom, Gabe found himself walking the corridor aimlessly. He was reluctant to stow the AK-47. It was, ironically, the only comfort he had, evidence that if danger emerged, he could fight back. A distant moan echoed from the utility room where the wounded pirates lay. Gabe decided to check on them. He navigated the labyrinth of corridors, ignoring the tightness in his own muscles, the dryness in his throat. When he opened the door, the stench of blood and sweat hit him. The pirates had shallow breathing, one drifting in and out of consciousness. They needed medical attention beyond basic first aid. If they died, so be it. Their attempt to kill innocent people had led them here. But part of Gabe, the part that still embraced a moral code, felt compelled to keep them stable. The one shot in the abdomen, cracked an eye open as Gabe entered. He muttered something in Spanish that Gabe's limited comprehension recognized as an insult. The man's wrists and ankles were tightly bound. A small puddle of congealed blood stained the floor near him. Gabe squatted, gazing at him neutrally. "Why did you attack us?" he asked calmly. The man only glared, eyes filled with defiance and pain. Gabe tried again in halting Spanish, but the pirate merely snarled, wincing at the agony of his wound. "Where is your base?" Gabe pressed, though he suspected he wouldn't get an answer. "Are there more of you coming?" Silence. Another curse. The man pressed his lips together, sweat beading his brow. Gabe stood, exhaling. Perhaps interrogation would be more effective later, if the pirate survived. He turned to the second man, whose leg wound had bled heavily. Unconscious or near enough that one offered no clarity either. Leaving them to their misery, Gabe stepped out into the corridor. The silence of the yacht was eerie now, except for the hum of engines and the occasional drip of water from the scuppers. Everything felt unnaturally still. The tension that had knotted his shoulders refused to loosen. This is only a temporary reprieve, he reminded himself. We might face danger again if the survivor returns with reinforcements. As he made his way to the upper deck, Henderson's voice sounded from behind. "Mr. Warren?" the captain said in a low tone, stepping out from the stairwell. "I just got a more precise location from the Coast Guard. They say they'll meet us at a coordinate about 2 hours north of here. 8 to 10 knots, we should be fine." Gabe nodded. "Good. Let's keep going. That distress call we found was presumably the runabout, so at least we know we didn't leave someone to die at sea." Henderson hesitated. "Yes, but what if that man is another pirate? He could cause trouble." "He'll have to get through me first," Gabe replied simply. "Once he's stable, we can question him." Another wave of fatigue washed over him, and he bit back a grimace. "I'll stand watch on deck for a while. You navigate." Henderson gave a reluctant nod. "Take care of yourself, son." Alone, Gabe climbed to the topmost deck, scanning the night sky. The adrenaline that had fueled him for hours began to wane, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. Yet he remained vigilant, eyes roving the horizon. In the distance, the gentle glow of stars kissed the calm Caribbean Sea. Anyone else might find beauty in the scene. For Gabe, it held only menace, a wide-open expanse where threats could lurk unseen. He rested his arms on the rail, letting the warm wind brush over him. His mind drifted to the violence he'd unleashed, the bodies that now lay under tarps below deck, the battered forms of pirates and innocent staffers. He'd done what had to be done, no regrets, but the weight of it all bore down hard. He closed his eyes, inhaling briny air, trying to center himself. A whisper of movement made him snap alert, spinning to face the new arrival. But it was only Victoria, barefoot, wearing a light shawl over her shoulders, her hair disheveled. She stepped closer, eyes flicking to the rifle in his hands. "I couldn't rest," she admitted softly. "Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured them shooting at us again." Gabe slid an arm around her, and she pressed against his side. They stood like that in silence for a moment. The ocean rolled beneath them, and the engines thrummed a steady lullaby. At length, Victoria spoke. "I'm so sorry, Gabe. This trip was supposed to be a celebration, a chance for my family to relax, and it turned into all this horror." He shook his head. "This wasn't your fault," he murmured, lips brushing her hairline. "Pirates made a choice to attack us. No one could foresee that." She swallowed hard. "But you saved us, repeatedly. I always knew you were capable, but, my God." She trailed off, struggling to express the swirl of gratitude and shock. He gently lifted her chin so their eyes met. "It'll be okay," he whispered. "We'll get through this." In the dim light, he saw tears glimmer at her lashes. A pang shot through his chest, remembering how close he came to losing her. He kissed her softly. "I'm just glad you're here, alive." A fragile half-smile curved her lips, then vanished. She glanced at the horizon. What if that last pirate returns with more men? Do you think the Coast Guard will arrive in time? Gabe's jaw tightened. "We'll have to hold them off if it comes to that." He gazed out at the water again, the faint silhouettes dancing in the moonlight. "I have some old friends in the Marines who used to say, 'Stay quiet, stay deadly.' Don't let them see you coming. That's how we survive. By not letting our guard down. Victoria nodded, hugging herself. The night felt oppressive, weighed by the possibility of a second wave. They remained there, side by side, hearts pounding with the residue of adrenaline and fear. Somewhere below them, an unknown man lay wounded. 2 pirates clung to life, and the bodies of the rest were being readied for a grim handover to whatever authorities awaited. The Sapphire Dawn motored steadily north, each passing mile bringing them closer to help, and possibly closer to a new confrontation. A sudden beep from the console interrupted the hush. Henderson's voice echoed over the intercom, urgent. "Mr. Warren, Miss Standish, you both need to get down to the cabin. That stranger just woke up, and he's not cooperating." Gabe exchanged a tense glance with Victoria. No rest, no peace. In a flash, they were racing back inside, hearts pounding anew, uncertain if the man they'd rescued would become a deadly threat from within. Gabe wasted no time descending the curved staircase that led to the main cabin area. Victoria followed in his wake, anxiety tightening her expression. The corridor lights were dimmed to preserve power overnight, casting shifting shadows on the plush carpeting. At the doorway of the small guest cabin, they found 2 staffers holding the newly arrived wounded man down. He was thrashing weakly, arms flailing, as if trying to claw his way off the bed. Blood-soaked gauze lay scattered, evidence that he'd ripped away the makeshift bandage. Captain Henderson hovered nearby, wringing his hands in frustration. The wounded man let out a feverish moan, muttering in Spanish interspersed with frantic English. Gabe's Spanish was rough, but he caught words like "no more, no more, they will kill me," repeated in a raspy tone. Henderson stepped aside. "He woke up about 2 minutes ago, started screaming and fighting," the captain said, voice shaking. "We tried to keep him calm, but he's delirious." Gabe nodded tersely. Slinging the rifle behind his back, he eased into the cabin and gestured for the staffers to step back. "Let me try," he said quietly. He raised his hands in a non-threatening posture, palms open. "It's okay," he said in Spanish as best he could. "We won't hurt you. We found you in a sinking boat." The man's wild eyes locked onto Gabe. He froze, breath rattling in his chest. Who are you?" His accent was thick, but the words were understandable. "My name's Gabe," he replied, inching closer. "What's yours?" A moment's hesitation. "Am Marco," he finally managed, wincing as the movement jostled his wounded side. His chest rose and fell in rapid spurts, pale from blood loss. "Where am I?" "On a private yacht," Gabe explained. "We found you drifting." He kept his voice low, calm. "Are you alone? Did you come from that group of pirates?" The word tasted bitter on his tongue. Marco's eyes flicked with alarm. "Pirates?" he echoed, spitting the word out like a curse. They boarded my fishing boat, shot my cousins. I tried to get away, but He broke off, squeezing his eyes shut. "They left me for dead." A hush settled over the room. Victoria, peering in from behind Gabe, looked stricken, empathy softening her gaze. Gabe tried to read the man's body language. Was he lying or telling the truth? His ragged breathing, trembling limbs, and genuine seeming terror suggested he might be a victim. Gabe spoke carefully, aware that if the man was faking, any slip could be disastrous. "We were attacked too," he revealed. "On this very yacht, a group of armed men boarded us. We fought them off, but we're not sure if others are out there. Do you know who they are, or where they come from?" Marco wheezed, pressing a bloody hand to his side. "They call themselves Los Escorpions del Mar," he said. "A small pirate ring. They extort local fishermen, Force them to bring in goods, or else. His eyes filled with tears. They killed my family, threatened me. I tried to run. They shot me. Victoria ventured closer, expression sorrowful. I'm sorry, she whispered. Marco's gaze flicked between them, mistrust still etched in his features. You're not with them? He asked in a near whimper, as though half expecting a betrayal. No, Gabe said firmly. We're not. We're trying to get to safety ourselves. He looked over his shoulder at Henderson. We need to patch him up better, or he won't make it. Henderson nodded, summoning a staffer who'd once taken a first aid course. In a flurry of movement, they re-cleaned Marco's wound, replaced the gauze, and bandaged it more securely. The bullet appeared to have gone through his side without lodging in bone, but infection and blood loss remained serious threats. Marco groaned but allowed the ministrations. While they worked, Gabe continued questioning him. How many men in Los Escorpions Del Mar? 20-30, Marco estimated, wincing. They're spread out. Some in the hills on certain islands, others on old fishing boats. They make deals for guns. Sometimes they do kidnappings. Gabe felt his pulse spike. The presence of a bigger network validated his worst fears. If that one pirate who escaped returned to their hideout, they could mount a second attack or target the Sapphire Dawn more aggressively. Have you heard about a man with a scar on his cheek? Led a raid tonight? Could be one of their leaders. Marco grimaced. Scarface. He's a boss, yes. One of them. A shaky exhalation. Then Marco coughed. Please, water. Victoria rushed to grab a nearby bottle, carefully pressing it to his lips. He drank in small sips, eyes closing in relief. Gabe studied him, searching for any sign that might indicate a ruse. So far, everything seemed consistent with a frightened fisherman who had been shot fleeing pirates. But Gabe's caution remained. Trust had to be earned. Once Marco had drunk his fill, he sagged back. They have more men on a bigger island, he rasped. They might come after you if they knew you survived. Pirates don't like leaving witnesses. Gabe's gaze hardened. We're heading toward the Coast Guard. We'll pass your story on. They'll need your testimony. He paused. If you're telling the truth, we'll keep you safe. The man's eyes flickered, grateful but fearful. No, I don't want them to find me. I want to go to any place that isn't here, he murmured. But if you say so. In the corridor, Andrew approached, drawn by the commotion. His face set into a worried frown. What's his story? He asked. Gabe relayed the gist. An honest fisherman forced under the pirates' control, or so Marco claimed, who tried to flee and got shot for his trouble. Andrew listened, jaw tight. This complicates things. Are we about to become a refuge for him? We can't just toss him overboard, Victoria interjected indignantly. He's injured. Andrew threw up his hands. I didn't say that, only that we need to be careful. We already have 2 wounded pirates locked up, and now we're harboring another unknown factor. Enough threats to last a lifetime. Gabe placed a hand on Andrew's shoulder. Let's keep him stable until the authorities arrive. That's all we can do. We can't risk turning him away if he's innocent. He shifted, addressing Henderson and the staff. Monitor him around the clock. If he becomes hostile, restrain him. But it looks like he's no danger right now. The older man nodded, releasing a tension-filled sigh. All right, I'll see that it's done. As the staff settled Marco more comfortably, Gabe stepped into the corridor with Victoria and Andrew. The family patriarch rubbed his eyes, fatigue etched in every line of his face. We've still got hours until help arrives, yes? He asked. Henderson, overhearing, nodded. At least 2 hours, maybe more, depending on how fast the Coast Guard can push through. We'll stay on course. Andrew turned to Gabe. I want to gather everyone, family and guests, in the main salon, keep them calm, perhaps try to get them to rest. This is all too much. Gabe understood. The shock needed an outlet. Sure, but let's do it in shifts. We don't want everyone together in one vulnerable spot in case something unexpected happens. Andrew offered a sad smile. Understood. I never imagined. I just want to see my daughter safe. I want to see us all safe. Victoria placed a hand on her father's arm. We will be, she said softly, though her eyes shone with worry. They drifted toward the yacht's main salon, a once luxurious space now littered with signs of the night's chaos. A staffer had cleaned away some bloodstains, but bullet holes still marred the walls, and furniture had been knocked over or riddled with fragments. Most of the guests had retreated to private staterooms, yet a few hovered in the salon, sipping cups of water or tea, trying to steady frayed nerves. When Victoria and Andrew entered, relief flitted across the guests' faces. They asked the same questions. Are we safe? Did any pirates survive? Did you see how they got in? Andrew tried to provide soothing words, while Victoria did her best to exude calm authority. Gabe hung back, scanning the room with vigilance. Everyone looked exhausted, eyes rimmed with dark circles. The aftershock of near-death experiences weighed heavy. At last, Andrew pressed for them to try resting. We'll set up a watch schedule, he said. Gabe, the captain, and a few staff members can rotate. Everyone else, please at least lie down. Some murmured hesitant agreement. Others simply stared, too keyed up to imagine closing their eyes. Victoria approached Gabe, her hand drifting to his. We should try too, she whispered. Even a short nap. He squeezed her fingers. You go ahead, he said quietly. I'll keep watch for a bit. She started to protest, but the worry in her eyes softened. All right, she relented, leaning in to kiss his cheek. Don't be long. Once she stepped away, Gabe resumed patrolling the yacht. He cleared each deck methodically, crew quarters, the small gym, the entertainment lounge. Every door, every alcove. Although he was confident the pirates who boarded had all been accounted for, dead or locked up, it gave him some measure of peace to be thorough. His final stop was the bridge, where Henderson stood at the helm. Beyond the windows, the dark sea stretched endlessly, broken only by faint glimpses of starlight and the reflection of the moon. All quiet? Gabe asked softly. The captain nodded. All quiet. Radar shows no vessels within several miles. We're making good speed. About an hour and a half, perhaps less if we push the engines. But I don't want to cause mechanical strain. He rubbed his temple. I never expected to see real piracy, not out here in these waters. Desperation breeds risk, Gabe murmured. We'll get through this. A moment passed before he continued. Keep an eye on the horizon for anything suspicious. I'm going to try to catch some sleep. Even a half hour might help me stay sharp. Henderson reached out and clasped Gabe's shoulder. Thank you, son, for everything. I'm sorry it fell on you to do what you did. I know it can't be easy. Gabe forced a thin smile. Don't worry about me, he replied, stepping out of the bridge. Just keep us moving toward safety. Inside, his conscience churned. Easy? No, it wasn't easy, but it was necessary. He found a vacant corner near the lounge, grabbed a throw pillow, and leaned back against a wall. The yacht's gentle rocking plus the engine's hum set a hypnotic rhythm. Exhaustion weighed on him like an anchor. He barely noticed the bullet-scarred furniture or the stale smell of fear lingering in the air. Within minutes, his eyes slid shut, plunging him into a restless sleep laced with blurred images of muzzle flashes and swirling water. He woke suddenly, uncertain how much time had passed. The engines still thrummed, and outside the window, the sky had lightened from inky black to a deep navy, hinting at the approach of dawn. Gabe rubbed his eyes, forcing the nightmare images to recede. His entire body ached, as if he'd been doing push-ups all night, but at least he'd caught some semblance of rest. Standing, he rolled his shoulders and checked the time on a nearby console. 4:15 a.m. According to Henderson's estimate, the Coast Guard might meet them by 5 o'clock or 5:30. They were close, yet each new minute felt like an eternity. As he made his way to the corridor that led to the staterooms, he passed the door to the cabin where Marco was being tended. Voices emanated from inside. A staffer and presumably Marco, speaking in low tones. Gabe paused, curiosity piqued. He leaned closer, eavesdropping. 8 men on the boat, Marco was saying, his voice hoarse but more coherent now. They boarded us, took our fish, demanded money. When I said no, they started shooting. A beat. I tried to hide, but they found me. The staffer replied sympathetically, "You're lucky these folks found you." Then he added, "You must rest now or you'll slow your healing." Gabe lingered a moment more, satisfied that Marco sounded genuinely traumatized, not cunning or manipulative. Slipping away, he ventured to check on the wounded pirates in the utility room. Sure enough, 2 staffers stood guard outside. One gave him a grim nod and said, "They're alive, but barely. Feverish. We offered them water, but they refused." Gabe frowned. "Let them stew," he said, though a twinge of guilt nagged him. "If they want to talk later, we'll see." He turned away, the adrenaline from earlier fading into a dull tension. "It's almost over," he told himself, recalling that the Coast Guard was en route. A small spark of hope began to flicker in his chest, but he stifled it. After everything, he didn't want to feel relief until the authorities were physically present, relieving them of this crisis. He climbed to the top deck, bracing against the rail and looking east. The faintest glow of dawn tinged the horizon pink. The ocean looked calmer now, and the sky above him was a gradient of dark blue merging into pale. The mild breeze felt cooler, carrying away the stifling heat of the night's horrors. Victoria found him there, barefoot again, a jacket pulled over her nightdress. She slipped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek between his shoulder blades. Her closeness reminded him of normalcy, love, promise, a future that existed outside this nightmare. He covered her hands with his own. "Any sign of them?" she asked softly. "Not yet," Gabe replied. He squeezed her fingers. But soon, after a moment, he turned in her embrace, studying her face in the gentle pre-dawn light. The events of the night etched fresh lines of worry beneath her eyes. Even so, she carried a certain resilience. "I never thanked you," she whispered, voice almost lost on the breeze, "for everything you did, every risk you took." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "You never need to thank me," he murmured. "I'd do anything for you, always." They stood that way for a long moment, letting the hush of the early morning envelop them. The drama of gunfire and bloodshed felt slightly removed in the face of the new dawn. Yet a tremor of caution rippled through Gabe. "Don't drop your guard," some internal voice warned. Danger had a way of reappearing just when you thought it was gone. Abruptly, the yacht's engines rattled, and the vessel lurched forward. Henderson's urgent shout echoed from the bridge. "Radar contact. Fast-moving boat at our stern." Gabe's eyes snapped wide, and his hand tightened on Victoria's. Their worst fear was manifesting. A new craft, possibly loaded with vengeful pirates, was bearing down on the Sapphire Dawn, and they still hadn't reached the safety of the Coast Guard. The eerie orange glow of early dawn had barely crested the horizon when Henderson's alarm shout rattled through the yacht's intercom. The Sapphire Dawn lurched, the engines roaring higher as the captain tried to coax more speed from the luxury vessel. Gabe and Victoria exchanged a startled look, then sprinted toward the bridge, adrenaline spiking. Entering the compact, high-tech command center, they found Captain Henderson hunched over the radar console, lips set in a thin line. Andrew, bleary-eyed but alert, stood by his side, gripping the back of the captain's chair. On the screen, a bright blip was approaching from behind, closing distance at an alarming rate. "Boat on intercept course," Henderson muttered, adjusting the radar's range. "I tried raising them on any possible frequency, but no response. They're definitely accelerating." Gabe peered out the windshield. With the sun barely rising, the water was still cloaked in muted light. But behind them, perhaps half a mile, a sleek powerboat's outline was taking shape. Even from this distance, Gabe discerned the craft's size and shape. Likely smaller than the Sapphire Dawn, yet built for speed. Whether it had come from the pirate ring or was an unrelated threat, he couldn't be sure. But it looked suspicious as hell. "Evasive action?" Andrew suggested, voice shaking. "Can we outmaneuver it?" Henderson grimaced. "We're not a speedboat, sir. The Sapphire Dawn can do maybe 20 knots if we really push her. That looks like it can do 35 or 40. Victoria clutched Gabe's arm. "Then they'll catch us." Gabe inhaled slowly, a battle plan already forming. "We can't outrun them. We need to prepare." He turned to Henderson. "Alert the Coast Guard again. Tell them we have a suspicious craft in pursuit. Ask for an ETA on their arrival." Henderson fiddled with the sat phone, speaking hurriedly into it. Meanwhile, Gabe turned to Andrew. "Get everyone inside, below decks if possible. Secure yourselves. Keep the doors locked." He hesitated, glancing at Victoria. "That includes you, Vic." She stiffened. "I want to help," she protested, though her voice wavered. He softened slightly, squeezing her hand. "You'll help by staying safe. I can't fight if I'm worried about you on deck, under fire." Her eyes brimmed with concern, but she finally nodded. I understand." With that, she hurried off to rally the guests. Andrew followed, shouting for people to move quickly. In the distance, the powerboat roared, bridging the gap from half a mile to less than a quarter. Gabe grabbed the AK-47 from the corner where he'd stowed it. A quick check revealed he had a spare mag, maybe 50 bullets in total. Enough for a fight, but not a drawn-out one. He cursed the fact that the yacht wasn't stocked with better defensive weaponry. Then again, who expected a floating palace to come under a pirate siege? Twice in a single night? Henderson ended his frantic call and reported, "Coast Guard says they're about 40 minutes out. They're pushing maximum speed, but that's the best they can do." 40 minutes? Gabe repeated grimly, striding out of the bridge onto the upper deck. "Let's hope we can hold them off until then." The pinkish light of dawn revealed the predator behind them in stark detail. A mid-sized powerboat with an enclosed cabin, perhaps 30 feet long, slicing through the waves with a deadly grace. On deck, he saw figures moving, 2, 3, possibly 4. Hard to be certain. A flash of metal glinted in the early sunlight. Weapons. Gabe's heart thudded. They're armed. No question about it. He pressed a button on the yacht's external sound system to address the crew. "All hands, potential hostile craft approaching. Secure yourselves. Staff with training, meet me on the aft deck with whatever we can use for cover. Move." A flurry of activity followed. Gabe sprinted down to the main deck, scanning for vantage points. The pirates would likely approach from the stern. That portion of the yacht had a wide-open leisure area, which was good for sunbathing, terrible for a firefight. He needed cover. He motioned for 2 staffers, Rohan and Omar, to drag tables, chairs, anything substantial to form a barricade. "Stay low," Gabe instructed them. Don't expose yourselves unless we have a shot." "Understood." They nodded, eyes wide with fear. Neither was a soldier, but their trust in Gabe was palpable. Another staffer, Carrie, arrived carrying a compact flare gun. Gabe raised an eyebrow. "Flare gun?" She shrugged nervously. "All I could find besides kitchen knives. Might distract them or set something on fire if aimed right." Her voice shook. "It's better than nothing." He gave a curt nod. "Keep it handy. Watch for an opening." In the near distance, the powerboat slowed as it aligned with the yacht's stern. Gabe popped his head over the makeshift barricade for a quick glimpse. For men, all armed, 2 with rifles, 1 with a shotgun, 1 with a sidearm. Their clothes were ragged, bandanas or caps covering their heads. The boat's hull bore no name, only chipped paint. One of them brandished his weapon in the air, firing 2 rounds. Crack, crack, shots that whizzed over the yacht. A warning. A voice shouted in thickly accented English, "Stop engines! Prepare to be boarded." The parallel to last night's assault was chilling. Gabe exchanged a look with Rohan, whose face blanched. Another volley of gunfire rattled the morning air, bullets pinging off the yacht's metal railing. Gabe grit his teeth. "Captain!" he shouted into a handheld radio, the short-range set they still had on board. "Don't stop for them. Keep going." Henderson's voice crackled back. "Roger that." The engines rumbled louder, but the powerboat matched speed effortlessly, staying behind them like a predatory shark. Gabe realized this standoff would be short-lived if they decided to open fire in earnest. The yacht offered limited ways to return fire effectively without risking the engines or leaving themselves exposed. He braced the AK on the edge of the barricade, scanning for a target. The men on the powerboat parted, giving him a brief glimpse of the driver. Gabe fired a short burst. Sparks flew off the boat's hull. One man stumbled back, possibly hit, but it wasn't a clean takedown. In response, the pirates unleashed a hail of bullets, forcing Gabe to duck behind the barricade. Splinters of wood and fiberglass erupted around him. "We can't keep this up for long," Rohan shouted, flinching as a bullet smashed through a table leg near his head. Gabe's mind raced. They needed a more strategic approach. If the powerboat got close enough to grapple or board, they'd have a repeat of last night. But this time, the Sapphire Dawn was battered and its people exhausted. He glanced at the water. Could he use the same tactic as before, diving into the ocean, sneaking around? The difference, broad daylight, and these pirates were already alerted. They'd gun him down as soon as he splashed. Another flurry of rounds hammered the yacht, punching holes in the lounge furniture. One bullet ricocheted near Gabe's face, close enough that he felt the heat. He hissed a curse, popping up to return a quick burst. The pirates yelled, ducking behind their boat's windshield. Suddenly, a voice from behind made him jump. "They're coming around on the port side," Carrie exclaimed, peering around the corner. Indeed, the powerboat was maneuvering, trying to position itself parallel to the yacht's flank, likely to toss a grappling hook or boarding ramp. Gabe's heart hammered. That was how it started last time, with the pirates latching on, swarming onto the deck. "Move! Cover the port side!" Gabe barked. He, Rohan, and Omar scrambled to shift their makeshift barricade. The pirates roared closer. Now they were a mere 20 yards away, easily close enough to toss lines. Gabe braced the rifle again, trying to line up a shot on the pilot. The brightening sky revealed the man's contorted face, a look of grim determination. Another pirate hefted a grappling hook and chain, preparing to hurl it. Before Gabe could fire, the pilot swung the powerboat wide, presenting the boat's side. Another gunman blasted away with a shotgun, peppering the yacht's hull with buckshot. Shards of fiberglass rained down. Gabe squeezed off for quick shots. Pop, 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 pop. The shotgun wielder jerked, a spurt of red blossoming on his shoulder. He tumbled back with a scream. The pirate holding the grappling hook hesitated in shock, then pitched the heavy iron anyway. Clanged against the yacht, failing to latch. They were in close range now. One more attempt and they'd probably succeed. Gabe's mind went to the flare gun Carrie held. "Use the flare," he shouted, pointing. "Aim for their boat. Try to set something on fire." Carrie's eyes were wide with terror, but she nodded. She stepped out from behind cover for a split second, raised the small flare gun, and pulled the trigger. A bright streak of flame arced across the narrow gap. For an agonizing second, it looked as though it would miss. Then it struck the boat's fabric canopy near the stern. Sparks erupted, igniting the material in a flash. A small flame crackled. "Yes!" Omar whooped, adrenaline spiking. The pirates on the powerboat yelled in alarm, one of them tearing at the burning canvas to toss it overboard. Gabe capitalized on the distraction. He rose to a knee, unloading a controlled spray of bullets at the driver's seat. The windshield cracked, and the driver slumped forward. The boat veered abruptly, colliding side-on with the yacht's hull. A dull thud resonated, rocking both vessels. Rohan lost his balance, falling sideways. Gabe grabbed him. The powerboat careened, smoke billowing from the scorched canopy. 2 pirates were down. One shot, the other valiantly trying to wrest control of the drifting vessel. Another repeated volley of bullets hammered the yacht, but it was sporadic, panicked. Gabe steadied himself against the motion, took aim again, and fired. One pirate collapsed with a shriek, clutching his chest. The last one let out a furious roar, dropping his rifle to grab the boat's wheel. "Get away from them!" Gabe yelled to Henderson through the handheld radio. "Full throttle now!" The Sapphire Dawn's engines roared, surging forward. The battered powerboat spun off to the side, half out of control. Carrie, Rohan, and Omar scrambled to keep from tumbling as the yacht accelerated. Gabe held onto the rail, heart hammering, firing one last shot at the boat's engine in an attempt to disable it. Sparks flew. Steam hissed from a bullet-ridden housing. The pirate boat slowed, listing awkwardly. In seconds, the gap between the vessels widened to 50 yards, then 100. Gabe peered through the swirling morning light, scanning for any sign of the powerboat re-engaging. Its engine sputtered, coughing black smoke. The canopy remained partially ablaze, and the pilot looked more concerned with extinguishing the flames than resuming pursuit. A thin cry of triumph welled up among the staffers. They'd survived another assault. Gabe's breathing came ragged. He slid behind the barricade, shoulders slumping. His rifle's barrel felt hot. Carrie still clutched the flare gun, her expression a blend of shock and exhilaration. Rohan sank to his knees, trembling. Omar let out a half-hysterical laugh of relief. Gabe gazed back at the powerboat, now a diminishing shape. He glimpsed at least 2 bodies sprawled in the boat's cockpit, while the last pirate battled the fire and the engine. With any luck, they'd drift or sink before mustering further aggression. "That was too close," Gabe muttered, feeling his heart gallop in his chest. The second assault in a matter of hours. The pirates were clearly determined, and perhaps more of them lurked somewhere in these waters. He pressed the radio again. "Captain, status?" Henderson's voice came back, cracking with relief. "We're clear for now. Coast Guard still about half an hour out. No new contacts on radar." Gabe turned to the staffers. "Anyone hurt?" They shook their heads, though Rohan had a small gash on his forearm, possibly from flying debris. Carrie was unscathed but trembling like a leaf. Omar's eyes were as wide as saucers. "I can't believe we did it," he whispered. "I thought we were goners." "Not today," Gabe managed. He forced a grim smile and placed a hand on each staffer's shoulder. "Good job." Seriously, you held your ground. They nodded, grateful for the praise, though fear lingered behind their eyes. Gradually, more people emerged from below decks, Andrew among them. He rushed to the rail, scanning the horizon. They're gone. For now, Gabe said. We disabled them. Andrew let out a shaky breath, turning to clasp Gabe's arm. And no one here was killed? Thank God. He frowned. Was it the same group, do you think? Hard to say, Gabe replied, glancing again at the faint shape of the crippled powerboat. But I guess so. We'll let the Coast Guard figure it out. He realized how calloused his own voice sounded, but the adrenaline still coursed through him. They'd faced lethal danger again and come out on top. But how many more times? Victoria emerged next, her expression frantic until she saw Gabe. She rushed into his arms, stifling a sob. I heard the shots. I was so scared you'd... She couldn't finish, trembling against him. He kissed her hairline, pressing her close. I'm okay. We're all okay. For now. He glanced at the staffers, who were quietly reassembling. Even though they'd fended off the new attack, the tension remained coiled, ready to snap. They had to keep their guard up until official help arrived. Henderson stepped out of the bridge, eyes scanning the skyline for the Coast Guard. We just have to hold out a little longer, he murmured. Another 30 minutes. We'll be in safer waters soon, I hope. Gabe gently released Victoria, stepping to the rail for a final look at their assailants. The powerboat was a smoldering wreck on the horizon now, practically dead in the water. Whether or not the pirates aboard survived, they were no longer an imminent threat. He felt no pity for them. Instead, he felt a burning question. Where was the one who escaped in the fishing boat? Possibly he had orchestrated this fiasco. Possibly he was still out there, coordinating more trouble. He clenched his jaw, exhausted but resolute. We stay at battle stations until the Coast Guard is physically here, he declared, addressing everyone on deck. No more surprises. They murmured agreement. Andrew took his wife's hand. Victoria took Gabe's. Relief battled with lingering anxiety on every face. The horizon glowed brighter, dawn fully arriving, the watery reflections turning from black to shimmering gold. A sunrise that might have been breathtaking under normal circumstances felt like a mocking backdrop to the grim trials they had faced. Still, they breathed easier knowing they had repelled the second assault. Down below, a frantic pounding suddenly emanated from the utility room where the wounded pirates were kept. One of the staffers ran up, pale as a sheet. They're shouting something in Spanish, something about a bomb. Gabe's heart lurched, eyes narrowing. A bomb? On board the yacht or something left behind by the pirates? Every muscle in his body tensed, and the precious relief they tasted evaporated in an instant. Another deadly threat might be lurking in the bowels of the Sapphire Dawn. Gabe broke into a sprint for the interior corridors, the staffer's words echoing in his mind. They're shouting about a bomb. Victoria trailed behind him, her expression twisted with alarm, but he cast her a warning glance. Stay back, he barked, tension fraying his composure. Let me handle this. Her eyes flashed with equal parts concern and stubbornness, but she knew better than to argue. She slowed, letting Gabe and a pair of staffers rush ahead. Andrew also followed at a short distance, commanding the others to remain in the salon. The corridor leading to the utility room felt oppressively narrow, the walls closing in around them. Dim overhead lights buzzed faintly. Gabe's heart pounded. A bomb? Could these pirates have planted an explosive on the yacht as a contingency plan? Or was it a bluff? At the door to the utility room, two staffers hovered. One was the guard, the other apparently came to investigate. Both looked rattled. They're yelling, saying if we don't let them go, A bomb will blow the ship, the guard stammered. But I've searched them before. No sign of a device. Gabe clenched his jaw. That doesn't mean there isn't one hidden somewhere else. Carefully, he cracked open the door. The stench of blood and sweat washed over him. The two wounded pirates were bound on the floor, leaning against stacked crates. The one shot in the abdomen, glared at him with feverish eyes. The other, leg wounded, was conscious but glassy-eyed. In Spanish, Gabe called out, "What's this about a bomb?" The one with the abdominal wound spat, wincing at the movement. "Free us," he growled, "or you all die. I need proof." Gabe shot back, voice low and dangerous. "Where is the bomb?" A harsh laugh erupted from the pirate's cracked lips. "We placed it earlier, on the main deck, hidden, the set with a timer. Maybe 5 minutes left." He grinned, revealing blood-stained teeth. "Let me go, or we all sink." A chill coiled up Gabe's spine. He could be lying, but if not, what's the trigger? Where exactly is it? Gabe demanded. Flipping to Spanish words, he hoped the pirate would understand clearly. The pirate only sneered. "Release us, and we'll show you." Gabe's mind raced. He didn't recall seeing any suspicious package or device. The pirates had boarded abruptly, rummaging for loot. Planting a bomb seemed like an elaborate step, but these men were desperate and well-armed. Maybe they'd planned to scuttle the yacht if ransoms weren't paid. "If you're lying," Gabe began. The pirate coughed a wet, pained sound. "Believe it or not, Marine, you're about to die." He half-laughed, then grimaced in pain. "Marine, that word." Gabe stiffened. "How do you know who I am?" "Your fiancé said it," the pirate hissed. "When we boarded, you were dangerous." He tried to chuckle again, but it turned into a spasm of agony. Gabe didn't let his expression shift. "I'm not releasing you," he said firmly. "And if there's a bomb, I'll find it." The pirate spat again, cursing in Spanish. The second one, the leg-wounded man, mumbled something about timer, beep beep. But it was slurred, delirious. They offered no more clarity. Gabe backed out, shutting the door. Andrew hovered, listening. "They threatened a bomb?" the older man asked, voice taut. Gabe nodded. "I don't know if it's true or a bluff, but I can't take chances." He glanced at the staffers. "We have to do a quick sweep. Check every closet, every compartment, especially the main deck. Look for anything suspicious. Wires, a device, something that shouldn't be there." Andrew paled. "We're running out of time if it's real. Let me help." Gabe considered. "Fine, but be careful. If you see something that looks like a bomb, don't touch it. Just call me." "Understood." Andrew nodded fervently. "Understood." They split up into teams, fanning out across the yacht. Gabe took the starboard side, scanning behind furniture, inside storage lockers. The staffers took port side, Andrew the lounge, and so on. The clock in Gabe's mind ticked ominously. 5 minutes, the pirate had said. That might be a lie, but it might not. He rummaged behind a drinks cabinet, rummaged through life vests in a storage bench. The tension roiled in his stomach. The pirates had come in a rush. Would they have had time to hide a bomb? Possibly one of them kept a small device on their person. Or the bomb could be something disguised as a personal item. Another chilling thought, what if it was stashed near the engines? Nearing the stern lounge, Gabe encountered Carrie, who was already flipping cushions, checking beneath lounge chairs. "Nothing," she reported breathlessly. "I can't find anything weird." "Keep looking," Gabe replied, forcing calm into his voice. He hurried inside. The bullet-riddled bar area looked the same as before, no new devices. He stepped into the small supply closet, only cleaning products, stacked towels. Nothing suspicious. He tried the galley next, still in mild disarray from the earlier assault, but no signs of an improvised explosive. Panic began clawing at the edges of his mind. If the pirates had hidden something, well, time was slipping away. The faint hum of the yacht's engines underscored the silent countdown. He glimpsed the clock on the wall, 4:40 a.m. If the device was set for 5 minutes from the threat, the timer might already be at 2 or 3 minutes by now. Outside in the main corridor, he nearly collided with Andrew, who shook his head in frustration. "I can't find a damn thing," Andrew sputtered. "Check the engine room," Gabe decided, chest tight. "Just in case. I'll go forward. If you see anything." Andrew rushed off before Gabe finished. They'd parted ways for maybe 10 seconds when a sudden beep sounded from overhead. Gabe's pulse kicked. He froze, straining his ears. Another beep, faint but distinct, repeated from somewhere behind the bulkhead to his left. He pressed his ear against the wall. The beep repeated, rhythmic maybe every 2 seconds. "Oh God," he murmured, dread coiling in his gut. It was behind the paneling. Gabe tried the door across the hall, which led to a housekeeping closet. Inside, the beep was louder. He rummaged behind mops and brooms. Sure enough, near the back corner, a wooden panel seemed slightly ajar, revealing a small crawl space used for wiring access. He yanked the panel open. There, blinking with a tiny red LED, was a rough metal cylinder the size of a thermos, taped to a support beam. A small digital display read 1:12, 1:11, 1:10, counting down. Tangles of wires protruded from the device, leading to what looked like a black plastic block attached to the cylinder. The beep sounded in sync with the countdown. Gabe's blood turned to ice. Less than a minute left. His mind jumped to his training, though he'd never been an EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, specialist. He knew basics: you do not tamper with a device unless you understand it. But the pirates had forced his hand. He fumbled for his multi-tool, cursing under his breath. Think, he muttered. The device was crude, suggesting it might be homemade. Possibly a chunk of C4 or improvised explosive. The timer looked store-bought, with some sort of power supply. Standard color-coded wires might or might not apply. His heart hammered as the display dropped to 0:58, 0:57. He called out into the corridor, "Bomb found. I need help." Andrew's voice answered from somewhere. Where? But Gabe barely registered it. He had precious seconds. At least the pirates gave them a device with a visible timer. That meant there might be a disarm route. 2 wires led from the battery to the block of explosives, one red, one green. Another wire, black, fed from the timer to the battery. Sometimes, in Hollywood cliches, cutting the red wire is the solution. But real bombs can vary. 0:48, 0:47. The beep quickened. Sweat trickled down Gabe's forehead. He recalled that many improvised bombs rely on a single circuit. If the circuit is severed, the timer can't trigger the blasting cap. But some bombs are rigged with anti-tamper features. He had no choice. If he ran, the explosion might breach the hull, sink them, or at the very least injure or kill half the people on board. He forced a slow breath, controlling the tremor in his hands. "Red or black?" he muttered. The green wire simply connected battery negative to the explosive block, or so it appeared. The red wire might be the positive lead. The black wire connected the timer to the battery's negative side. The simplest guess: cut the main power feed from the battery to the explosive. But which is it? 0:40. He had to pick. Trembling, he carefully pinched the red wire near the battery with the multi-tool's wire cutter. The beep hammered in his eardrums. Another drop of sweat slid down his temple. He squeezed, severing the wire. For a split second, the LED flickered. The beep stuttered. Then the timer resumed, continuing the countdown: 0:35, 0:34. No good. The device was still powered, likely through the black lead. Panicking, he pressed the multi-tool against the black wire near the timer. "Come on," he breathed. Snip! The wire parted. The timer display froze at 0:31, the beep cutting off. A hush hung in the air. He stared at the device, half expecting it to detonate anyway. 1 second, 2 seconds, nothing. A long exhale shuddered out of him. He carefully extracted the battery, prying it loose from the improvised harness. The LED went dark. He'd done it. The wave of relief that washed over him was so intense his knees threatened to buckle. Andrew burst into the closet, eyes wild. Did you defuse it? Gabe nodded, swallowing a wave of nausea. Oh God, Andrew gasped, leaning against the doorframe, burying his face in his hands. That was close. Gabe's heart still hammered. Yeah, he said, voice ragged. They actually had a real device. Now we know their threats are legitimate. Andrew nodded, eyes haunted. We owe you again. No time for thanks. Gabe pried the bomb from the beam, carrying it gingerly. Even unpowered, he didn't want to jostle it. We should stow this somewhere safe until the Coast Guard arrives, somewhere it can't harm the hull if it goes off. He paused. But I think the main charge is a note now, thanks to cutting the wires. Andrew frowned. A bucket of water, maybe? Or we can put it in a cooler out on the aft deck. Gabe considered. A cooler full of water might not neutralize an explosive, but it could contain some of the impact if a secondary trigger existed. Yeah, he murmured. Let's do that. Carefully, they carried it up to the aft deck. Rohan and Omar hustled to help, rummaging for a large plastic bin, filling it with water. Gabe lowered the device in. No sparks, no reaction. Just a silent chunk of metal underwater. Only then did Gabe let out a shaky breath. Andrew placed a hand on Gabe's shoulder, face ashen. I can't believe how close we came. You saved us again. Gabe rubbed a hand across his eyes, exhaustion pressing down hard. Let's secure the pirates. They're using this as leverage. We need the authorities to handle them properly. Andrew nodded grimly. Together, they marched back to the utility room. The door flung open, revealing the two wounded pirates. The abdominal one smirked when he saw Gabe. You're too late, he croaked in Spanish. Boom. Gabe stared him down, a flinty anger in his eyes. Your bomb is defused, he replied in Spanish, voice cold. You lose. The pirate's face fell, disbelief flickering. Then hatred burned in his glare. Kill me now, Marine, the pirate spat. I'll never talk. Gabe's stomach twisted. He was done with threats, done with carnage. Let these criminals face justice. He stepped back, nodding to the guard staffer. Keep them locked up. They so much as blink the wrong way, alert me. The Coast Guard can handle them soon enough. The pirate cursed in Spanish, raging at his own defeat, but Gabe paid no heed. He led Andrew out, shutting the door. Leaning on the wall, Gabe let out a long, trembling exhalation. Relief mingled with the adrenaline crash. Andrew stared at him, speechless, unsure how to offer gratitude that measured up. Just, thank you, Andrew whispered. Again and again. I have no words. Gabe gave a small nod, eyes distant. Let's make sure we get to the Coast Guard. That's all I want. He turned, trudging toward the upper deck, longing for fresh air. All around them, the yacht's occupants slowly emerged from hiding, hearing that the bomb threat was neutralized. Victoria found him as he reached the stairs. Her eyes pooled with tears when she saw his drained expression. She rushed to his side. Gabe, she whispered, voice shaking, they said you stopped a bomb? He nodded numbly. It's taken care of. They threatened to blow the yacht if we didn't free them. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. This is insane, she breathed. First the pirates, then a second attack, now a bomb? He stroked her hair, swallowing the lump in his throat. We'll be okay. Just a little longer. Coast Guard will be here soon. He repeated it like a mantra, half to reassure her, half to steady his own nerves. Because after all he'd been through, gunfights, stabbings, defusing bombs, he felt dangerously close to the edge. Victoria clung to him, tears dampening his shirt. Andrew and Cassandra stood nearby, the mother's eyes red-rimmed. A few other guests watched from a distance, hushed disbelief etched on their faces. In that moment, the ramifications of their nightmare truly sank in. This was no random event. They had been deliberately targeted, and the criminals were ruthless. The Standish family's opulent vessel had become a war zone. Tom slipped forward. The dawn sunlight grew stronger, casting warm rays across the battered deck. Staff members scrambled to reposition furniture, recheck for hidden devices, and offer some form of stability to the shaken guests. Gabe directed them, ensuring that every inch was searched, no panel left unchecked. They found nothing else suspicious, which was a small mercy. The pirates' single bomb attempt had failed. At around 5:20 a.m., a flurry of activity gripped the bridge. Henderson, scanning the horizon, finally let out a whoop of triumph. Coast Guard vessel spotted. Bearing north half a mile. The cry echoed through the yacht's corridors. Relief poured through everyone like a flood of fresh air. Gabe climbed to the bridge. Through the forward windows, he saw a gray-hulled patrol craft slicing through the water, flying the local Coast Guard's ensign. A flash of red and blue lights glinted in the morning sun. It felt like seeing an angel after a night in hell. But just as hope surged, a voice crackled over the sat phone. "Sapphire Dawn, this is Coast Guard Cutter Resolute. We're approaching your position. But we've got a problem. We've picked up multiple transmissions from unidentified vessels in the area, some discussing a ransom and retaliation. Are you sure the threat is contained?" Gabe exchanged a taut glance with Henderson. Even as the cavalry arrived, the specter of a broader pirate network loomed. Had these criminals already put a price on the Standish family? The respite might prove fleeting if bigger forces were en route. A wave of relief passed over the decks of the Sapphire Dawn as the rugged gray hull of the Coast Guard cutter came into view. Brilliant morning sun glinted off white foam where the patrol vessel cleaved through the water. Its radar mast and fluttering ensign exuded a sense of authority the yacht's survivors so desperately needed. After the harrowing night, pirate attacks, gunfights, bombs, help had finally arrived. Gabe stood at the starboard rail, binoculars pressed to his eyes. He could make out the ship's name painted on the side, Resolute. He counted several uniformed figures on deck manning a mounted machine gun. A throaty rumble of powerful engines vibrated the air. Within minutes, the patrol craft slowed, matching the yacht's speed. Over the radio, the Coast Guard hailed them once again. "Sapphire Dawn, this is Resolute. We're coming alongside your stern quarter. Stand by to receive our boarding party." Gabe exhaled slowly, tension still coiled in his gut. The battered yacht had been a stage for horror. Any sense of safety felt painfully elusive. His gaze shifted to Victoria, who hovered beside him in a borrowed jacket and rumpled sundress. Relief flickered in her eyes, but also caution. They had learned the hard way not to assume all was well too soon. Andrew, Cassandra, and several guests gathered near the aft deck, anxiously watching. Captain Henderson was at the helm, guiding the yacht so the Coast Guard vessel could draw near without collision. The gap narrowed to a few dozen yards. Over a loudspeaker, a crisp voice commanded, "All passengers remain on deck, clearly visible, and keep hands where we can see them. We'll send a boarding team to verify your situation. Do you copy?" A staffer acknowledged on the yacht's handheld radio, "Copy, Resolute. We're ready." Gabe turned to the crowd. "They'll come aboard and secure the vessel. Everyone comply with their instructions, no sudden moves. They need to confirm who's who." Victoria gripped his arm. "You'll talk to them, right? You can explain everything." He gave a tight nod. "I will." Moments later, a powerful inflatable RHIB rigid-hulled inflatable boat launched from the Coast Guard cutter and skimmed the waves toward the Sapphire Dawn. Gabe's heart thumped as he watched half a dozen uniformed personnel, body armor, sidearms, rifles, pull up alongside the yacht's swim platform. One by one, they clambered aboard with swift efficiency, scanning the deck with disciplined precision. Their leader, a burly lieutenant with a tidy beard, called out in accented English. "All passengers on this side, please. Captain Henderson? Identify yourself." Henderson stepped forward, raising both hands in a non-threatening gesture. "I'm Captain Robert Henderson of the Sapphire Dawn." The lieutenant nodded, then his gaze swept the group. "We have multiple reports of piracy, potential casualties, and an armed confrontation. Who's in charge of security here?" Gabe stepped up, shoulders squared. "I am. My name's Gabriel Warren, former U.S. Marine. I neutralized the pirate threats on board." His voice came out steady, though the last hours weighed heavily on him. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed, measuring Gabe's stance. "We'll separate everyone for questioning soon, but first we secure the vessel." He turned, barking orders to his team in a language blending Spanish and French Creole. They fanned out, checking corners and compartments. Another petty officer approached the group of guests, directing them to sit or stand in the open lounge area while they did a preliminary sweep. Andrew, face-etched with relief, gently guided Cassandra to comply. Victoria lingered near Gabe, her hand brushing his. The lieutenant caught the gesture and gave a subtle nod as if acknowledging the link between them. "What's your immediate situation, Mr. Warren?" the lieutenant asked. "Injured? Hostiles still on board?" Gabe straightened. We have multiple pirate casualties, some dead, some critically wounded. They're confined in a utility room. We also have a rescued fisherman, shot and in need of medical attention. Some passengers are bruised, battered, but mostly stable. A flicker of surprise crossed the lieutenant's face. Quite the night. Then he jerked his chin. Show us. Gabe led him and 2 armed Coast Guard members through the yacht's interior. They passed bullet-scarred walls, bloodstains, appended furniture, grim evidence of the siege. In the utility room, the pirates were shackled. One moaned in delirium, the other glared with feverish hatred. The lieutenant crouched, observing them with professional detachment. They threatened us with a bomb, Gabe explained. I disarmed it. The device is in a cooler on the aft deck. The lieutenant's eyebrow shot up. You have ED training, Marine? Not formally, Gabe replied, voice tight, but enough to cut the right wires. A trace of grim admiration flickered across the officer's face. We'll handle disposal. Good work. They moved on, eventually finding the rescued fisherman, Marco, in a small cabin. Coast Guard medics checked his vitals, stabilizing him. Marco's eyes fluttered open. Panic flickered there until he recognized an official uniform. In halting Spanish, he whispered that pirates had shot him. The medics carefully lifted him onto a stretcher for transport back to the cutter's small infirmary. Across the yacht, the rest of the boarding team confirmed the dead pirates, tagging them for removal. The scene was chaotic, but it felt oddly orderly compared to the terror of the past hours. Andrew and Cassandra consoled the other guests, letting them know real help had arrived. A ripple of relief spread among the staffers, some of whom wept quietly. Finally, the lieutenant reassembled on the aft deck with Gabe, Captain Henderson, Andrew, and Victoria. We appreciate the cooperation, he said, removing his hat to wipe sweat from his brow. You all gave us quite a story. We'll need official statements from each of you. Andrew nodded vigorously. Anything you need. We want these criminals brought to justice. The lieutenant inclined his head. You'll likely be asked to come ashore for further investigation and depositions. This may also involve your insurance providers, local authorities. There's a lot to process. Henderson exchanged a weary look with Andrew, who placed a hand on the captain's shoulder. We'll do what's necessary, Andrew said. A petty officer approached, saluting. Sir, we've confirmed no further explosives aboard. The bomb disposal team says the device is inert. Also, we scanned the area, no sign of additional pirate craft within several miles. Victoria breathed a shaky sigh. Gabe slipped an arm around her waist. Even with the Coast Guard here, the memory of those gunshots and near-death escapes lingered. The lieutenant's gaze swept across them, reading their exhaustion. All right, he said more gently. We'll escort your yacht to port. With your permission, we'll keep some of our people on board to ensure safety. We can have a small medical team examine any injuries. Andrew nodded, relief evident. Yes, please. That would mean the world to us. Thus began the slow journey back to a secure harbor, a location the lieutenant identified as a mid-sized port on a nearby island with better resources. The Resolute remained close, essentially shepherding the Sapphire Dawn. 2 Coast Guard officers stayed on the yacht itself, patrolling the decks, verifying logs, helping the staff bandage wounds, and securing the unconscious or semi-conscious pirates. Despite the relief that rescue brought, Gabe felt no true rest. His mind still buzzed with adrenaline-laced memories, his body sore from fights, rope burns, and constant tension. He retreated to the upper deck for a moment of quiet, gazing at the horizon. Victoria joined him, slipping her hand into his. This nightmare is almost over, she murmured, searching his face. He nodded slowly. Yeah. We'll dock soon, answer questions. Then, deal with the aftermath. A heaviness settled in his chest. He wondered how the family would handle the psychological toll of captivity, terror, and violence. How he himself would handle it. Victoria squeezed his hand. We'll face it together. He tried a small smile. Definitely. In the corner of his eye, he noticed Andrew approaching, his arms folded across his chest. The older man looked at Gabe, expression somber. The lieutenant says they'll likely impound the pirates' weapons, interview each of us. They might keep the yacht for a while as evidence. Gabe turned, letting go of Victoria's hand. That's expected. There's the matter of the dead pirates, 2 autopsies, ID checks. Andrew hesitated, glancing at Victoria. We owe you more than we can ever repay, Gabe. We were planning to toast your bravery once we got to Martinique, he said with a fleeting attempt at humor, but now I don't even know where we'll end up. Gabe held up a hand. No thanks needed, Andrew. I did what had to be done. Andrew grimaced. Still, saving our lives multiple times, We're lucky to have you in the family. Emotion tugged at Gabe's features. He dipped his head. I appreciate that. Then he looked at the horizon once more. The Coast Guard cutter loomed near, its crew vigilant. The day was bright, the sea less ominous in the sunlight. Yet the knowledge of a bigger pirate network out there cast a subtle shadow over them. An urgent shout sounded from the bridge. One of the newly arrived Coast Guard officers leaned over the railing, calling down to the lieutenant. Sir, we've got a partial radio intercept, a vessel matching the missing fishing boat's description. They're hailing local contacts, discussing a final punishment for the Sapphire Dawn. Gabe's pulse jumped at the words. Even with official protection, the threat wasn't fully extinguished. Could a vengeful collaborator be planning one more strike in broad daylight before the yacht reached safe harbor? A hush fell over the decks of the Sapphire Dawn at the warning from the Coast Guard officer on the bridge. Vessel matching the missing fishing boat's description, discussing a final punishment, the phrase jabbed at Gabe like a shard of ice. He stiffened, scanning the horizon again, heart pounding. Victoria stepped closer, her gaze darting from Gabe to the Coast Guard official. They can't possibly try another attack, right? Not with the Resolute here. Andrew folded his arms, voice tense. You'd think that would deter them. But after what we've seen, I'm not sure they value self-preservation much. The lieutenant overheard, turning sharply. We've got them on radio intercept, but it's patchy, some local station. The boat that fled your yacht might be rallying a few more criminals. They're angry about their losses. His mouth pressed into a tight line. They want vengeance. Are they insane? Cassandra asked from nearby, voice shaking. They'd challenge the Coast Guard? Desperate men do desperate things, Gabe muttered. We should stay alert. We're not safe until we're behind guarded docks. The lieutenant nodded. We'll accelerate. Cutter's going to open the throttles and you should do the same. He radioed instructions to the Resolute. Within moments, the patrol ship surged ahead, beckoning the Sapphire Dawn to follow faster. Captain Henderson complied, pushing the yacht's engines harder than they'd run all trip. Gabe felt the deck vibrate underfoot as they picked up speed. The wind whipped over the rails, tangling Victoria's hair. She clutched Gabe's arm. How long until we reach port? The lieutenant answered before Gabe could. We're about an hour out. Maybe a bit less at full steam. Then his expression darkened. I'll get more men on watch at your bow and stern. If anything approaches, we'll see it. Gabe nodded. I'll take the stern myself. Just to be sure. Victoria didn't protest. She saw the resolve etched in his face. Instead, she pressed a trembling kiss to his cheek. Please be safe. He mustered a small smile. Always. He headed aft, stepping around debris still scattered from the earlier battles. The staff, along with the Coast Guard soldiers, had done their best to tidy up, but bullet holes and scorch marks remained. Through the swirl of sea spray, he spotted the Resolute forging ahead like a stalwart guardian. The sense of security should have been reassuring, but worry gnawed at him. If this rumored final punishment involved a bigger network, they might come from multiple directions. Time inched forward as the yacht and cutter barreled across the waves. Gabe stood watch, eyes scanning the horizon in every direction. The sun rose higher, warming the decks. Andrew joined him briefly, but the older man was too restless to stand still. He soon paced away, checking on Cassandra and the guests. Captain Henderson's voice occasionally crackled over the intercom, updating them on speed or course adjustments. At last, the faint line of land appeared against the sky, a cluster of low-lying hills fringed by a harbor. The lieutenant came on deck, pointing. That's the island port. We have a small base there. It's not large, but enough for an investigation center and a secure berth. Gabe nodded. Relief teased at the edges of his mind. Soon, they'd be moored in a place with official protection, crowds, and law enforcement. Pirates seldom risked high-profile shootouts in well-guarded harbors. This ordeal might really be done, he murmured, half to himself. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't quite vanish. It was as though the sea itself carried a warning. As they approached, the island's features sharpened. A rocky coast, a modest pier, a smattering of industrial buildings near the shoreline. The Resolute slowed, preparing to guide the yacht into the harbor channel. Gabe heard the engines shift from a roaring pitch to a more controlled rumble. His eyes flicked across the water. The harbor mouth was in sight, marked by a breakwater. Beyond it, the water glimmered in a patchwork of blues and greens. A few smaller civilian vessels plied the area of fishing boats, a local ferry. Coast Guard personnel on the cutter signaled them forward. Suddenly, one of the watchers atop the Resolute bellowed a warning. Over the radio, his urgent words crackled, "Suspicious craft to starboard, moving fast from behind the breakwater." Gabe jerked his head to the right, pulse hammering. Sure enough, a small, nimble speedboat peeled around the tip of the rocky barrier, churning white foam behind it. Even from a distance, Gabe could see shapes on deck, men, maybe 3 or 4, hunched over something large. A weapon? A torpedo? Dread spiked through him. The lieutenant cursed under his breath, grabbing binoculars. "They're ignoring hails," he muttered. "We'll intercept." He whipped out his radio, relaying orders to the Resolute. The Coast Guard cutter revved its engines, pivoting to intercept the incoming speedboat. Andrew, Cassandra, Victoria, and the others rushed to the rail, fear etched into every face. "One more attempt," Andrew groaned. "Dear God." Gabe's jaw set. "Get down, all of you. The Coast Guard will handle this." But he couldn't keep the tension from his voice. If that speedboat carried a bomb or heavy weapons, even a cutter might be at risk. And if the boat got close enough to the yacht. The speedboat roared straight toward the Resolute. Over the water, a sharp crack rang out. The patrol cutter fired a warning shot from its deck gun. A spray of water erupted near the speedboat's bow. For a heartbeat, Gabe thought the boat might turn away, seeing the threat. Instead, it swerved, avoiding the shot, and continued a breakneck course toward the harbor as if determined to slip past the cutter. The Resolute advanced in pursuit. Another thunderous report. The cutter's gun fired again, this time raking the water closer to the boat's hull. The speedboat barely dodged. Then muzzle flashes erupted on the speedboat. The men on board were firing back with automatic rifles or something similar. Gabe's heart lurched. It was utter madness to trade shots with a heavily armed military vessel, but these pirates were desperate or suicidal. In a matter of moments, the confrontation escalated. The cutter's deck gun spat a burst of shells. Smoke and water plumed around the speedboat, but it kept moving, zigzagging to avoid direct hits. Gabe's knuckles whitened on the rail. He hated being a spectator to the fight. If that boat somehow reached the Sapphire Dawn. Suddenly, a well-aimed shot from the cutter must have found its mark. The speedboat's engine sputtered, trailing black smoke. It veered starboard, losing momentum. One of the men on board fell into the water, a rifle clattering after him. Another tried to wave the boat's driver, but the engine coughed again. The entire craft slowed to a near stop. "Thank God," Victoria breathed behind Gabe. Staff members exhaled shaky sighs. Andrew muttered a prayer, clutching Cassandra's hand. Yet just as the Resolute moved in for a closer pass, a massive explosion ripped through the speedboat. The shockwave battered the air, sending spray and debris skyrocketing. Gabe and those on the yacht flinched as a surge of orange flame and black smoke billowed upward. The cutter lurched from the blast wave but kept its distance. Within seconds, the speedboat vanished in a fiery conflagration, charred wreckage bobbing on the waves. A stunned silence fell across the yacht. Gabe's ears rang. The pirates must have detonated something, maybe accidentally, maybe deliberately. The possibility of a suicide mission churned his stomach. At the rails, the Standish family stood aghast, the guests gaping in open-mouthed horror. Radio chatter crackled from the cutter. Gabe couldn't catch every word, but it was clear the Coast Guard was astonished by the explosion. Through the haze of smoke and drifting debris, it seemed no one on the speedboat could have survived. The lieutenant lowered his binoculars, mouth set in a grim line. "It's over," he said softly. "Whatever they intended, they blew themselves up. Possibly a fail-safe device or improvised bomb on board." Gabe's body trembled with residual adrenaline. He forcibly relaxed his clenched jaw, breathing through the wave of relief, shock, and sorrow. Even though these men had come to do harm, it was jarring to see them obliterated in an instant. "We'll proceed to port," the lieutenant continued, voice subdued. "We'll have a cleanup detail recover what they can." but I doubt there's much left. Andrew exhaled raggedly, turning to Gabe. That must have been the final threat. The one that fleeing pirate arranged, right? Gabe nodded, swallowing. Looks like it. They tried to strike near the harbor, maybe to cause maximum damage if we let down our guard. The Coast Guard saved a raid. Emotion tightened his chest. I love you too, he said, voice thick. We'll get there, Vic. I'll make sure of it. She pressed her forehead to his chest, inhaling the steady scent of him, letting her heart calm in his presence. After a moment, she drew back, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. Just come back to me, she whispered. He bent his head, kissing her softly. I promise. They lingered in a quiet embrace, hearts pounding in unison. In the distance, the hum of city life continued, motorbikes, distant traffic, the calls of street vendors. Yet here in the courtyard, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. Eventually, they returned inside, where Andrew had arranged for a simple dinner to be delivered. It felt like a somber Last Supper before a major battle. The four of them, Andrew, Cassandra, Victoria, and Gabe, ate quietly, exchanging worried looks. Andrew finally spoke, voice low. I'm proud of you, Gabe. It feels odd to say that to a future son-in-law I haven't known for that long, but you've shown courage and loyalty far beyond anything I imagined. Cassandra blinked back tears. And Gabe spotted the first wave of special forces landing on the sandy western shore. Men fanned out, rifles at the ready, disappearing into the jungle brush. Meanwhile, the cutter's helicopter rose, carrying Team Bravo, 8 troopers in tactical gear, harnessed for rappelling. The chop of rotors filled the air. The craft circled the fort, then hovered over the higher ramparts. All squads, go, Diaz commanded. Seconds later, gunfire rattled in the distance, faint pops carried over the water. Morales stiffened at Gabe's side, gripping the railing. Gabe's heart hammered. The assault had begun. He pictured the battered walls, the hidden corners. The pirates wouldn't go down easily. Commander Diaz monitored a feed from the helicopter's camera, flickering on a screen. Gabe glimpsed the ramparts, muzzle flashes stuttering along the crumbling stone. Team Bravo rappelled down ropes, returning fire. Smoke curled from the cracks in the fort's walls. The vantage was surreal, reminiscent of historical siege warfare merged with modern tactics. An urgent voice buzzed over the radio, contact inside the courtyard, multiple hostiles pinned down. They have heavy machine guns. We're taking cover behind rubble. Diaz's jaw tightened. Bravo, push forward. Alpha, flank them from the ground side. Another transmission from the jungle team. Alpha here, encountering traps along the trail. 1 wounded. Proceeding carefully, Gabe felt his gut clench. The pirates had rigged the approach just as he'd warned. Still, the special forces pressed on. The aerial feed showed Bravo infiltrating a stone archway, muzzle flashes flickering in the shadows. A wave of satisfaction mingled with dread. Finally, these criminals face a well-equipped, well-trained foe. 10 minutes ticked by, each moment stretched taut with suspense.